Welcome to another edition of AV Rant. I am Tom Mantry, and I'm here with.
Rob H. This is AV Rant. It's your home theater and AV questions answered. Happy 4th of July to everyone who was celebrating that yesterday. We're recording a day late, and I put up the wrong time on Facebook and Twitter, so it's just been a cracking start to
Is that
this
why
week.
James was like tried to call me?
I guess so.
It's like
Well,
during
it's
dinner, and my all of a sudden, Google was it
yep.
everything is Hangouts now, right?
Last
Yeah.
week, we recorded at a strange time with Lee and myself. Thank you to Lee Overstreet, by the way, for filling in once again. Well, Tom was away there last week, so yeah, it's people took me at my word when I accidentally wrote 6 p.m. Eastern time. I'm like, well, 6 p.m. my time. That's what was going on in my head. I'm in
Uh,
Pacific time, so anyway, we're here. We're
yes.
here to answer questions. It's going to be fun.
Yes. Yes. Thank you, Lee, for stepping in. I listened to the opening of that. It sounded like it went fine.
It did.
Anywho, I was in the Smoky Mountains in Tennessee and in Gatlinburg, which is apparently where everybody was. It was extremely,
Ah.
it was very tourist heavy, which doesn't bother me that much because I was there with kids. I was at a family reunion. It
Mm-hmm.
was not immediate family. It was my cousins on my mom's side. My mom's side of the family used to get together for family reunions, and then when everybody got old or whatever, they stopped having family reunions. They just went to funerals and weddings, and then those are starting to peter off, and the cousins wanted to get together anyways. So
Yeah.
there's 32 cousins on that side because my mom
Whoa.
was one of
Okay.
11.
Yeah.
My
Okay.
mom was one of 11, so there's 32 cousins, and 20 of them showed up with their spouses and or families. uh so there's a total of something like 58 people there.
Yeah.
it
It was a.
was it was a lot. We
Yeah.
sort of overran the place. So it was a lot of fun. I had T-Mobile apparently has zero presence in Gatlinburg,
Mm-hmm.
so I would go in and out of service within seconds. Like at some point, I got like 20 things at the same time, and one of them was
Yeah.
just saying, "Are you going to post a podcast?" And my answer was like, "Nope,
I
nope."
didn't know how long you were away, so it's like,
Yeah, well, we drove 13 hours back on Sunday night, and I was going to do it Sunday night when I got back, but
mhm,
instead I just fell asleep
that'll
and
happen.
I did it Monday morning. So it was good. It was a good vacation. It was very, very nice. I got to listen to some Bose speakers because
Ooh,
somebody brought their little Bose
mm-hmm,
dock thing
man.
for their iPod, iPhone, whatever. Yeah, it was fine by the pool, whatever. Yeah. So there was a receiver there hooked up to a VHS, no less.
Nice.
And there, I was trying. Somebody said, "Well, turn the receiver on, we'll get the speakers working." Was the speakers
Mm-hmm.
were like these big, like Kenwood box things that probably are 100
Sure.
years old. And I was like, and they wouldn't turn on. I was like, "Well, I could." No,
Yeah, and of spending your whole time
step
fiddling with that.
away
That's what's gonna
from
happen
this
there.
receiver,
Yeah.
Tom. This is not your problem. So, yes, I did have a good time. I am still extremely exhausted. I had to jump right back into work today, and it did not go well. I was like half asleep the whole time, but I'm glad to be back. This
Yes.
is AV Rant, the podcast where we answer your home theater and AV questions. To get your questions answered, all you have to do is ask. You ask by emailing us at question@avrant.com. If you so decide, you can also CC, and it is actually preferred if you CC Rob at AV Rant and Tom at AV Rant, just in case something goes awry and whatever. But generally speaking, if you email question, it goes onto our question list, and we answer them in chronicle kind of order. So chronological order is what we're going for, but sometimes we do group them a little bit if people are asking generally
Yeah,
the
we
same
haven't done that
question.
too much. Pretty much first in, first out order in which they're received. That's more or
I
less
know,
what
yeah, I
happens.
know, but every once in a while we mix them up. So you can also hit us up on our website, www.avrant.com, where you can leave us a comment. Go to facebook.com/avrantpodcast, where we're very active and like to post things here and there. And if we don't answer your questions, one of our listeners will, and if they say something wrong, we will come in and correct everybody. But generally speaking, everybody kind of knows what they're doing at this point, so it's a very good community of people.
Mm-hmm.
Twitter, Rob is at First Reflect. I am at avrant_Tom, and Austin, our producer, is at Austin TEN Pond. Uh, for him. If you would like to tweet him, I don't know why you would, but you could. If you say, hey, the production of this podcast is crap, definitely tweet him.
Oh yeah,
he also
there's so much to do with the video and audio side of it.
He does. He's the whole reason I'm fuzzy right now in this video is because of Austin. I'm convinced of that. Now, Austin also has his own podcast as We Watch Movies. It is a podcast solely about the use of pine cones in crafts, arts and crafts, pine cones.
I can see that.
So, yeah.
Pine cone lasts a long time.
They do.
Yeah.
They do. And they smell nice, at least at first. That's what they say.
Yeah.
This week, we have some listeners of the week, or a listener of the week. We have Matt G. Matt ordered some Ascend Acoustics Sierra-2 speakers and talked to Dina over there. Not our Dina, a different Dina. Believe me, when he emailed it in and said, I talked to Dina, I was like, oh, you talked to Dina? Last time I talked to Dina, I got teary-eyed. I was so excited to talk to Dina. I was like, oh, Dina, I've been talking to you. I see her on my Facebook feed all the time.
We should let people know. Dina was the original co-host of AV Rant way back in the day, because we definitely have people who have come in after the departure of Dina, so they might. So
there was Dina, and then there was a little bit of a listener coming in, and Clint coming in and doing it, and then Liz for a while was great, and I think she's had a baby for sure.
Yes.
She might, I don't know if there's another one in the works or whatever, but I know they have one. It's so funny because when I have 50-something cousins there, like I had all of these cousins in family members that I had no idea what their names were. Now I have like names to go with all those faces. In fact, faces to go with all those faces because I knew they were married and that was it. Like they're married to somebody. I don't know.
That's still so many people that if you bump into them on the street, you'll be like, "You look familiar."
Yeah. Nowadays, after this, the 50 that are there, I can probably name all of them.
Oh,
yeah. I mean, that's how good it was by the end. We all ate dinners together. That made all the difference. So at the end of every day,
yes.
we all ate dinners together.
Well, thank you to Matt.
Thank you, Matt.
We mentioned last week we're not 100% sure we got everyone who's supported the podcast in some way, although Tom's been looking at the donations and it did not appear that we got any donations last week. So
yes. Yeah. So if you want to donate to the podcast, that money goes to support the podcast, pay for hosting fees and all that stuff. Eventually Rob's going to buy himself yet another speaker he does not need.
But I'd rather get an OLED screen. That's what I'd like to do.
Oh yeah, well we're going to need some big donations.
We're going to need some bad boy.
By the time we have enough donations to pay for that, you'll be wanting something else because that will be
because it wouldn't be fair if it's just me. We'll want one for Tom and one for Austin too. So
that's true.
That's a lot of big donations.
So yes, for you can donate. You go to the www.avrant.com, click on the Buy Us a Cup of Coffee link, and you can leave a PayPal donation, which you can use your PayPal account and just transfer money directly over, which I think is kind of free-ish, or you can use your credit card, which I think is kind of free-ish as well. I don't think they for you.
I think there's like we pay a fee or something or other.
We do. We pay some sort of small fee. I don't know what it is.
You say how much you want to donate. That's how much will come off your credit card.
And we'll take whatever PayPal will set out our doors. So there you go. All right, this week, let's get right into it. In the news via Jonathan, IMAX will now build you a private IMAX theater starting at $400,000 for the entry-level Palaeus,
I think.
Palaeus?
I think so. I'm not sure. I think it's Palaeus.
Palais.
Yeah.
Palianness. Is it
some sort? Is it French?
Play? I don't know. Whatever it is, for $400,000, they'll probably tell you how to say it right too. Which gets you up to 18 seats, dual 4K 2D, 3D projectors, and the proprietary IMAX surround system. And you know what that means? They took the labels off of whatever speakers and they put their labels on. And that is not me being sarcastic. That is absolutely true. That's exactly what they did. There's no way they invented speakers. And a media playback system. If you got the extra cash, you can step up to the platinum package for a cool $1 million.
Yeah, you can have up to 40 seats in the $1 million one.
Does that get you all you have to do is provide the room, and they'll just do the carpet and everything, the drywall, everything.
You got to provide the room, and then they build the whole thing for you. As far as I know.
I mean, honestly, for 40 seats or 18 seats, doesn't really seem like it's that bad of a deal. You know, I kind of want to pick my own speakers, but other than that, like, can I put my own subwoofers in there? You know, other than that. Now, like, I mean, they probably have worked with speaker manufacturers in the past where they say, oh, we want this and this and this, and they make it for them. But yeah, I don't think that there's some IMAX lab someplace where they're building their own speakers. I just don't believe that. They'll be also be offering an add-on playback box called the Home Premiere, which lets you rent new movies concurrently with theatrical releases. The box is priced at 10 grand and uses fingerprint recognition for security. I hope it's better than the iPhone one, because you're like 2 out of 3 times maybe 1 out of 3 times it'll work. The box is priced at 10. Rental prices for movies have themselves not been announced, but similar services charge $500 per screening.
Yeah, but if you're gonna have 18 people there, then divide it.
I think they'd rather just go to the movies.
Well, maybe
they wouldn't.
It could be that,
because it's cheaper. I mean, you're like, okay, it's like this much for you, and if you share like your lap, then you can split the price in half, per seat.
Well, I mean, this is certainly for the well-heeled. I won't be having this anytime soon. They were talking about the that $400,000 Palais or however it's pronounced one is a minimum of a 10-foot tall screen. And being that it's IMAX, I guess it's the 4:3 aspect ratio. I'm not sure if they're doing 4:3 or 16:9.
16:9.
Well,
in the home, it's got to be 16:9.
Yeah, when they do digital, it's usually the 16:9. I mean, full IMAX is a 4:3 screen, so I'm not 100% sure what they're putting in there, but 10 feet tall anyway. That's certainly larger than your normal home theater screen, which is why they need 2 projectors overlapping each other just to get enough brightness. No mention of it being HDR, though. So, because these aren't laser projectors. These are just, they can do 3D. They can do IMAX 3D. But I don't think it's HDR.
Good enough.
1.5 million for HDR, maybe.
Yeah, no doubt.
I'm sure it's coming.
The upgrade is out there. They're going to get it to you in about 10 years. Antoine sent us, Sony announced 4 lower class 4K TVs with HDR10 support. They're all part of the XVR series. They use LED edge lighting. It's exciting. And only the X800 models have the HDR10 out of the box and triluminous backlighting. I had to look that word 5 times before I could say it right. I was like, what is that word again?
That's Sony's thing. They like their triluminous. That probably means it has quantum dots, because that's what they're seeming to use. They've used that term triluminous for many things over the years, but these days it seems to indicate quantum dots. So.
All right, so the X750 and the X700 models need an HDR10 firmware update and probably won't have wide color gamut.
Yeah, because they don't mention anything about the triluminous, and they're using the quantum dots to get the wide color gamut. So it seems like only the X800 models, which are only available, 43 and 49 inch sizes? It's really weird. They're like small. The X750 is only available in 65 inches, but it doesn't have the triluminous, and it doesn't even have HDR10 out of the box. It needs a firmware update. These are, I don't know, a little bit strange models. I seriously doubt any of them are 10-bit panels. I would definitely bet dollars to donuts these are 8-bit panels, and they're just using some dithering to try and make it look a little bit like 10-bit colors. So, I don't know. These seem to be missing a lot of things I would have on my personal checklist if one of the things I wanted was an HDR, support a high dynamic range television. But nevertheless, good to see at least support for the format is coming down in price.
I mean, but support doesn't necessarily mean it does.
I know, really... HDR compatible, not quite the same thing as HDR capable.
Yeah, it's like, we can accept the signal.
That's right.
I mean, like, we're good with that. We're down with the HDR10. Yeah, we're good with that.
But at least you won't get a blank screen.
Yeah, this smacks of what do we have in the pipeline right now that we can upgrade and get some of the stuff that people are excited about. What do we have coming out that we can shoehorn this in, and what's the most we can do?
Which was the fear that you know. You'll have HDR support, but it won't necessarily look great, because Sony has purposely not gone along with the HDR premium certification at all. So we don't know how bright these get. These might not be getting that much brighter. They certainly probably aren't hitting 1,000 nits. I would be shocked if they do. Yeah. So
I really, this is a very dangerous time to buy a display, to be absolutely honest with you. There's going to be a lot of things being thrown at you that says all the right things, but in such a way that you go, oh, when you get home, you're like, wait a second, compatible.
If Samsung would just say that they're willing to support Dolby Vision, I'd be a lot, because Samsung's displays have that evolution kit thing where you can actually attach new hardware to the back of them and upgrade their processing and features and support for codecs and stuff like that. They have the ability to do that. So if they would just come out and say, we do intend to support Dolby Vision at some point, I'd be so much more keen to recommend Samsung, because overall Samsung's putting out some really nice LED backlit LCD displays that support HDR10 right now, get all the way up to 1000 nits. It's a software thing that would allow them to support Dolby Vision. So well,
probably
gotta wait another year.
Coming. They're probably going to announce it at CD or something like that. All right, Walmart looks to be taking on Amazon by introducing free 2-day shipping via their $49 a year shipping pass subscription. Because there are so few Walmarts around, you driving over there just as out of that. Yeah. Anyway, much like Amazon Prime, you'll need to look for a shipping pass logo on products. It's about as exciting as a ham sandwich, but
yeah, well, you know, they're half the price of Amazon Prime, $49 a year instead of $99. So I don't know, their selection of products doesn't seem to be as large as Amazon's. That's why Amazon is still leading the way.
Yeah, I love me some Amazon. Let me be honest with you, I do. Panasonic's Ultra HD Blu-ray player will launch in North America in September for $7 bones. So
that's right. That's the news.
Yay.
They will be, at that point, they'll be the fourth Ultra HD Blu-ray player on the market, because the Samsung is out right now. The Philips is like, I don't know, coming to retail any day now. They said July for the Philips player. The Xbox One S will be coming out in August. That'll be the cheapest. For the 500 gigabyte version, will be $300, so that'll be the cheapest Ultra HD Blu-ray player. And then this Panasonic in September at $700, and its claim to fame is it has 7.1 analog audio outputs, and none of the other players do. So
totally unnecessary, but yes.
Especially if you want Atmos or DTS-X, because then you must use an HDMI connection.
Totally. I mean, that was totally an important thing when HD DVD and Blu-ray first came out. Totally an important thing when that came out. Not so much now.
I could see it being the quietest player, just as in terms of how loud the disc is when it's spinning, or because people have said the Samsung player is actually a little bit noisy. So if you have it like directly under your TV in front of you, you can probably hear it spinning away. We don't know, like the Xbox One that came out originally was wonderfully quiet, but now that the Xbox One S is 40% smaller, I don't know, maybe it'll be noisier. Who knows? We don't know yet. But so just from that point, if that's worth an extra $300 to you, potentially, a quieter spinner, because people have said
$300, and you can have somebody chop a hole in your wall. You can shove it out into the other room. It'd give you back $150
muffle
after
the
that.
Samsung with a quilt.
Yeah. Why is my Ultra HD Blu-ray player overheating? I don't know. My wife's got a black case on her iPhone, and she's like, "Go check what time it is." And we were at the pool or whatever. I grab it, phone's freaking on fire, and I press it. It's like, it's too hot to use. I'm like, "You think, honey? Seriously?" Put it in the whatever. All right. Some comments from our listeners. We got from McMansion Chris, who says he doesn't live in McMansion, but totally does. Discovered that Oro 3D is not totally dead. While browsing, not totally dead. It's like it's only mostly dead. Miracle Max. Miracle Max. Give him a pill. Chocolate coating makes it go down. It's not totally dead. While browsing for movie showtimes, he noticed that Regal has 22 Oro 11.1 by Barco equipped theaters in the U.S. He wonders how the theater experience compares to Dolby Cinemas. I wonder how much the cost differential is, because the Dolby ones are stupid expensive.
And I wonder if there's actually any movies that they're getting in the form. It's one thing to have the theater with the playback capability. It's another to have the content to actually play in said theater.
How do you feel about Bollywood? Because that's pretty much what you got.
Yeah. I mean, there were a couple of movies that came out in Oro. The only one I really know of was Red Tails. Red Tails definitely came out in Oro 3D.
What the heck was that? Red Tails?
Red Tails. That was the George Lucas thing about the Tuskegee Airmen. That's the only one I know for sure. There were others, but there's been like nothing since. And I mean, this was the whole thing where the cinemas were trying to come up with a sort of like universal immersive audio format, but it's like Dolby Atmos has basically won. Like, where is DTS-X? There are no DTS-X theaters. They are so far behind the curve, and then Oro 3D just has like no content. So pretty much Dolby Atmos has kind of won, but seems to be the case.
It's unfortunate. I mean, really, because or 3D made the most sense as far as having how to explain things to your customers.
Yeah.
Like, okay, how much space do you have on your wall? Well, if you have this much space, you can put one speaker above the other speaker. And if you have that much space, you can put another one up there as well, and then you need one above your head. Yeah. That's pretty much it. That's pretty much the whole thing.
I mean, most people get Atmos. There's 2 rows of speakers that go above you. Now sounds come from above you, so that's not too hard to explain either.
Yeah, it isn't now, but then you have the way that they the receivers handle it too, and it becomes a complete.
Well, that's different outside of the theater. That's in the home, but.
All right, Dorsel.
I mean, this is the only name I have on Facebook, so
all right, anyway,
I think it's probably the name of a company, maybe? I don't know. I don't want to insult the guy. Maybe that's his name, so...
I don't know. It looks like a name to me. It could be Dorsel. Anyways, whoever this person and or entity is asked us a few weeks ago if he should buy an SVS PB-1000 or a PB-13 Ultra in what amounted to like the smallest room we've ever seen, if I remember correctly. Is that right?
It was quite a small room, yes.
Yes. And so since we looked at this pictures and went, dude, you're going to have to sit on that thing. Yeah. We suggested he get dual PB-1000s. Instead, he took our advice. Thank you. Yay. And he says now he knows what bass is supposed to sound like, and he just loves them. So good on
Yay.
You.
It all worked out.
How in God's green earth do we have questions from last week?
Because we left one. We had many.
Every time I go away, I get Tom's away, so here's an extra long podcast for you. I'm like, what is the deal? All right. I'm sorry. I try not to go away, but sometimes I have to. All right. From last week, apparently one was missed. Ted's speaker purchasing plans completely changed. He was about to pull the trigger on some Ascend Acoustics Sierra-2 towers with RAW tweeters, which we said he only needed the bookshelves.
Sierra-2s. That's what we were saying, but he was going to go with the towers.
Yes. And a matching Sierra Horizon RAW center. When his wife vetoed the decision, she thought they were ugly, but was mostly concerned about floor space, which bookshelves would have totally helped you out with that. Yep. But anyways, she thought they were a bit okay. She wanted what she really wanted was on-wall speakers. So Ted researched and wound up leaning towards the M&K Sound MP150 on-wall monitors, and his wife surprised him by buying them for him. She's like, enough of this crap. I already heard about it.
No more dithering.
I'm just buying them. I will let you know. So anyways, he says it's a little bit late now, but what do we think of the M&K MP150 speakers? I think they may be, in fact, the best speakers I've ever heard.
It really kind of binds your hands when your wife has bought the speakers for you.
All honesty, you can let your wife listen to this podcast right now, and I will tell you, darling, you have done a fantastic thing. You really have. You have treated your husband as the best speaker in the whole universe, and if anybody tells you different, they clearly do not love your husband the way that you do.
Yes, I agree that you got very, very good speakers. They were bought for you by your wife. That makes them the best speakers that there ever could be.
If they were gold plated with platinum tweeters, they could be no better than they are right now. They are the best.
Now, for everyone else, Ted, stop listening. Definitely for your wife, stop listening. Now, first of all, I want to say I'm being genuine when I say you got very good speakers, because They are. They not only are they very good speakers, they are literally the speakers that are used in many recording studios, in many mastering studios, in many mastering dubbing stages. Those are very literally the speakers you will find on their walls in many instances. So you definitely got good speakers. Now, I will say that when the original M&K, the original Miller and Kreisel company sort of went under, there was a period there where they kind of had to disclose all their financials, and it came out just what kind of profit margin they were actually charging on their speakers, which was a little bit dismaying about that, just how inexpensive some of the parts were and how much they were charging for them.
None of us, not a single one of us in this room that are listening to this podcast wants to know how much it costs to make these speakers. I'm going to be dead honest with you. Every single one of you out there is like, I got a deal. You do not want to know how much it costs to make this. It is ridiculous. And honestly, the profit margins are there for a reason. They need that in order to make money for the company, to finance additional R&D for new products that are coming out, marketing, all that stuff factors in there. So I don't begrudge them that, and Lord help us all if we ever found out what the profit margins were on all of the stuff that we do, but, I mean, because it's dismaying.
One little hint was they use 3 tweeters in these speakers, and they play loud, but not louder than a lot of other speakers out there that managed to do it with one tweeter, which tells you a little bit about like, why do you need three of them to get that? So there's that in there. But the way I'll put it to you is this: David Fabricant, who is the owner and founder of Ascend Acoustics, he used to work at Miller and Kreisel. That's where he got a lot of his experience designing and making speakers. When he set out to create Ascend Acoustics and created the original CBM 170s, those were basically his answer to the M&K speakers, where he's like, this is what I can do at this price point. The original CBM 170s didn't play as loud as the original M&K 150 series speakers did, but he's like, they're similarly neutral. They have similar level of overall quality, but he's selling it at the price that he could sell it by selling it factory direct, which was like an order of magnitude cheaper. Right. So very honestly, if you compare the current M&K 150 speakers to the Ascend Acoustics like CBM 170s or especially the CMT 340s in that SE series line, they're quite equivalent in sound quality in my mind. Now, we were suggesting the Sierra speakers, which I think are a step above that, but then they don't have the form factor that you wanted. So I mean, You've heard me recommend the CMT 340s or the CBM 170 SE series speakers all the time because I think they're really good speakers. So to say I think these M&Ks as on walls are very much in line with those, I'm saying you got darn good speakers. So that's what I think. Yeah.
So he says, is there any reason to avoid SVS subwoofers in favor of M&K subwoofers? M&K subwoofers are more expensive, but the M&K owners seem to swear by them. I think. Okay. No, subwoofers are agnostic when it comes to speakers they're paired with. They just need to play high enough to get to the low point of whatever the speaker is. SVS subs aren't going to have a problem with that. They're going to be cheaper. Frankly, I see no reason why you would spend more money than SVS.
No, yeah, I mean, of course, there are the people who, their dealer sells M&K, so of course they're going to encourage them to get M&K subs along with their M&K speakers, and this has been a ongoing thing for a long time where people are like, I bought this brand of speakers, they also make subwoofers, should I get the matching brand of subwoofer? Because there's a psychological component to that, but performance-wise, there's no advantage to getting the M&Ks, especially in Ted's room, which is very small.
Yes.
And he was planning to go for SVS 2000 series subs, probably the SBs, which at least they're the sealed boxes. In his room size will completely be able to overpower that room if you want them to. So
you'll be dismayed at how much you won't be able to turn up your volume.
That's right.
Like if you want to turn up your volume, get the SB-1000s. If you want to not turn up your volume too much and want to have lots of headroom that you will never use. The MP150s have their front face plate pointed at a slight 7-degree down angle. It's just part of the design of the on-wall cabinet. He was thinking about mounting them above his plasma. He tends to have 2 rows of seating, and the speakers are already angled down a bit, so is this a good idea?
It seems a little too high.
It does to me as well. Depends on, I guess it depends on how high your plasma is.
That's true.
I mean, if it's on like a cabinet, it's kind of low, and you're just putting it like right above it, then maybe.
Still seems a touch high, especially for the front left right. I mean, for your center speaker is going to either have to go above or below. You don't have much of a choice when you've got a plasma on the wall. So I could see it for the center speaker, but for the front left right, I'd still try to get them closer to ear level myself.
Well, I mean, 7 degrees is not that dramatic, but I'm trying.
It isn't.
Is this an in wall or an on wall? It's an on wall, right?
So
if I'm trying to understand this. He tends to have 2 rows of seating, and the speakers are already angled down a bit. So he's talking about the 7 degrees. 7 degrees is barely an angle. I mean, it's not a lot. So I mean, you're talking a couple of inches up from where you would normally put them in order for that 7 degrees.
Yeah, I mean, remember these were largely designed as mixing station speakers. So most mixers have like a console in front of them. So they basically designed the speakers to sit on the console, which puts them a little bit above your head, which is why they angled them down a little bit. But it's not as high as above a display. So they're not so much meant for that.
Yeah, I agree. I wouldn't. I mean, maybe the center channel over the top of it.
The center channel is going to have to go somewhere.
I would test it either way. I almost want to take.
And remember, you can turn them upside down so that now they're angled upward.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I would consider, at least with the center channel.
Yeah.
I would consider putting it underneath but upside down, or on top in the right direction. Like just put it up there briefly I mean, even literally just have your wife hold it. Like, here, honey, you bought me these speakers. Hold them up there. Don't drop them, or I'll have to buy something else. And then you could just listen to it for a second and see if it how you feel about it.
Yeah.
May be that you're just like, about the same either way. But it could be that it's not. All right. If he mounts the speakers of this plasma, which we don't suggest, will that make Atmos speakers redundant in the future? How much vertical separation is really needed in order for Atmos speakers to be worthwhile? Well, it depends on which Atmos speakers you're talking about.
Right.
So if you're talking about front heights, then yeah, maybe. Could very well be. Depends on how high that is. If you're talking about top middles, then no, it's not going to make any difference whatsoever. So
yeah, it really would only be the front heights that might, because I mean, even if you did mount them on the front wall above your plasma, you're still definitely going to know that they're in front of you.
Right.
Like they might seem a little bit too high, but they'll definitely be still in front of you. Then if you had top front speakers or top middle speakers in the ceiling above you, you'll definitely have enough separation there because just imagine speakers in the ceiling, you're not going to mistake for being speakers on the front wall. So that's the separation. But yeah, like Tom said, the front height speakers, there might be a little bit, some overlap on those ones.
Yeah. He's also hearing from forum folks, that always goes well, that his M&Ks are power hungry, would greatly is the word that is written here, benefit from external amplification. Is there any truth to this?
They are 4-ohm speakers.
And if
but they're also THX speakers.
And if you're, how far away are you sitting from these bad boys?
Yeah,
again?
that's right. Yeah.
You know, I mean, yes, everything can benefit from external amplifications when you're sitting 100 feet from it.
Yeah, because they do have very high power handling. So, but being a THX design speakers, that means they never dip below 3.2 ohms. That's part of the specification where
Which should
THX
work
says you
just fine with almost
can't let them dip below 3.2.
Everything, single receiver out there is not going to have a problem with that.
Yeah, you need like 0.2 of a watt per speaker in your room size to be hitting full 85 dB, maybe even 90 dB from how close you are to these speakers. Really don't need that extra. If you were in a way larger room and you were sitting 15 feet away from them, then yes.
Then we could see it. Then we could see it. Yeah. So regarding amplifiers, it's a bit confused. A doubling of wattage only equals 3 dB more SPL.
Yes.
So why would an external amplifier be in any use when its AV receivers are respected 90 watts per channel? If he gets a 180 watt channel amp, that's only 3 dB more output. That's for clearly in this case, it's not. You're not going to be using it anywhere near 90 watts, not in any stretch. But if you are using a vast majority of that wattage already, then, you know, for these transient peaks where you need a huge transient peaks is not the right word, but for this just momentary volume, you know, loud noises, you're going to need a whole lot of power all at once. And that happens very rarely. That's when those amplifiers, those external amplifiers, make a difference. That, and when they dip into such low ohmage that they're drawing huge amount of power from the amplifier, they're drawing it from the amplifier at those moments, at those frequencies, at those for that period of time. You know, like it's just like electrostats. People are like, you need huge amplifiers for electrostats. You don't. No, you can use the smallest thing in the world. You just can't turn it up very loud. You gotta sit real close.
That's right.
Other than that,
you
know. It will never draw the kind of power that it will never require the kind of power that it could theoretically need in order to get to the volume that it would take at a further distance, you know, than that. So when you're sitting
like given the efficiency of these speakers, it's possible that if you're listening at full reference volume, 85 dB the majority of the time, with peaks as high as 105 dB, then maybe you are using as much as 1 whole watt the majority of the time per speaker. That could be the case, getting you to about 85 dB. And then to get 20 decibels louder, you would need 100 watts just for that momentary peak. That's theoretically possible in the room that he's got. And we should mention that most AV receivers, when they spec how many watts per channel, they're typically talking about 2 channels driven simultaneously, not all 7 driven simultaneously. You can kind of take the number like 90 watts per channel. That's probably 2 channels driven at the same time, meaning it has about 180 watts to go around. You can probably divide that by 7 and actually get an idea of how much it could deliver simultaneously to all 7. However, most content isn't asking for full volume from all 7 speakers at exactly the same time. So, you know, there are differences with external amps, but again, it really matters on room size and how close you're sitting to these speakers. And in your small room, sitting as close as you are, you just don't need the extra power.
Yeah. So again, folks on the forum say it's not about watts, it's about amperes. or electrical current. Forum people say things like, even at lower wattage, better amplifiers deliver more current. But wattage is just amperage multiplied by voltage. So is a low watt, high amp amplifier using less voltage? Yes, because science doesn't work in high-end audio. None of the science, all the science that you know, all the things you learned about electrical theory, that goes right out the window when you hook it up to a speaker. And everything's up for grabs. That's right, right? Is this making sense to you? Because that's basically...
This does come up later because another fellow is asking about clarification about the whole relationship of watts and amps and volts and stuff like that. So the signal that is being sent to the amplifier. So let's imagine you have an external amplifier and you've connected it to a pre-pro. That pre-pro is sending out a low-level signal via RCA or XLR connections. What is varying in that signal is the voltage. The voltage is carrying the difference in the signal. That's what's saying to get louder, quieter, what frequency to play. It's varying the voltage of the signal. Then that is connected to your speaker, and your speaker draws the power that it needs from the amplifier in response to that voltage. The voltage is you can, I hate the analogy of water pressure because it's not really, it's, the voltage is a difference between the two sides. It's like creating a vacuum on one side.
That's right.
Like you've got the speaker wire coming out is forming a loop, right? It's going out of the amplifier into the speaker, out the other terminal of the speaker, and back into the amplifier, and it forms a loop, and then the signal goes back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. So the voltage is creating this differential between the two sides, and the current races through the wires to try and satisfy that differential. It's like, oh, there's room over here, let's all race this way. Oh, now there's room on the other side, let's all race back the other way. And then the speaker presents a load, it presents a resistance to the electrons flowing through that signal path, and that's what the ohm rating is telling you. So 4 ohms means there's less resistance, which means more electrons can flow through. If it's 8 ohms, then it's a higher resistance, so fewer electrons will flow through, and the number of electrons is the amperes. So what we're saying is the voltage signal, that's going to be what it is. That's the signal coming out of your pre-pro. That's a signal coming out of your player. And then in response to that signal, saying, here's how much room I've got over on this side for electrons and how much resistance the speaker produces to that, the amplifier sends as many electrons through as it can with a lower resistance, meaning that more current flows through. So when they're saying that you have a lower resistance speaker, a lower ohm rated speaker, therefore you need a beefier amplifier that can deliver more amperes, that's kind of true if you need that many to get that loud. And you just don't because you're never playing it that loud.
The way that the hose, the water pressure thing really kind of works is you don't think of it as turning on the spigot and water flowing through. What you think of it as, you took the hose and you shoved it into a gas tank. You've all seen this in the movies, right? You shoved it into the gas tank and you want to get some gas out. You are the speaker, the gas is the amplifier, and the tube is the speaker wire, basically. So you suck on the end of the tube in order to get to create a vacuum, to create a differential in pressure so that the gasoline goes up the tube and out again, and out down the other side. Now, if you need a whole lot of gas in just a couple of seconds, you either need a really big tube or you need to suck really hard. But you can, if you can't just have one or the other. You have to have kind of both going on at the same time. If the speaker's requiring a whole lot of power and there's not enough power to get through it, well, then something has to break down. It's going to be...
Yeah, and in that analogy, the sucking force that you're applying is decided for you.
Yeah.
And what you're varying is the size of the tube. So if you have a lower ohm speaker, it means you just have a fatter tube. The sucking force is the same, but you have a fatter tube, so more gas has to flow through that tube.
And if you run out of gas, you start sucking air, and the whole thing falls apart, basically. And the amplifier starts to fail, essentially. So
it's clipping.
You're nowhere. No possible situation can I imagine where you will be in the situation where you will not have enough gas for this, if that helps.
Not in this situation. If you had a way larger room and you were sitting 15 feet away, then maybe.
Yeah. So, all those people are crazy people. Anyways, some people, speaking of crazy people, describe hearing huge differences going from an AV receiver to a high-end separate setup with big external amplifiers. Ted's trying to spend money so bad. He must have.
Well, he's falling into
It's
all
okay.
the
We've all
things
done
that
this.
We definitely have. I certainly have
Oh, I
myself. Tom definitely has.
I will fully put my hand up and say
Yep.
I once really wanted external. I still want external amplification. I once thought I needed external amplification to make things sound better.
Yep.
I don't any longer.
Yeah,
Anyways,
because what?
they talk
Sorry.
about
Yeah. Go ahead.
better detail and imaging and realism. Is there
Mm.
any truth to this? The answer is mostly no.
Mostly no.
Mostly no. The things that you can reasonably assume by going with external amplification that you might experience would be lower noise floor.
Could be.
If you're having a receiver that is hooked up to speakers that are highly efficient,
Mm-hmm.
and you might be hearing a little bit of hiss, you can expect
Mm-hmm.
that. There's a theoretical possibility that you do have a very power hungry speaker and you
Sure.
do have a big room and you are sitting very far away from them and they are running out of gas, and therefore that could happen. It could be that these people are going from a lower end setup or something very basic, and they skip all the intermediate steps and go straight to separates, in which case, yes, they're going to hear these things because they're going from something kind of crappy to something. And chances are they change their speakers at the same time, so whatever. But mostly what they're hearing is the sound of what it felt like to spend a whole bunch of money and expect there to be a difference, and they are hearing that expectation. That's what
when I went from my original Kenwood Dolby Pro Logic 2 receiver, which was the first full-on surround sound receiver that I ever bought, and it was cheap, it was like $250 or something like that. When I went from that to my first it was a Yamaha AV receiver, and I did get a 2-channel amp to go along with it, and I hooked all that up. At the time I had Polk speakers. You better believe I convinced myself that I heard a difference. Whereas I will tell you straight up, I was in the back of my head quite disappointed because I really didn't hear a difference. I really didn't hear it. I was looking for a difference. And eventually I convinced myself that, I hear more detail, or it's more separation between, like, honestly, I didn't hear any difference. And because I didn't have a big enough room for there to be, or speakers that revealing enough or anything like that.
Like a normal human being, the first thing you need to do when you're in the situation where you just spent a bunch of money and you're convinced that you should hear a big difference and you're not hearing a big difference, but you're like, well, maybe I hear a little difference. Maybe there's a little bit there. I can kind of hear something. So then you go and you look for external validation. And you do that by, a lot of people these days do that by, totally natural. I don't blame these people for doing it because we've all done it. They go and they look for somebody else who has bought the same thing or is thinking about buying something similar, and then having them validate that they too are hearing that difference. There's nothing wrong with this. It's a completely normal psychological thing. We're just trying to justify this purchase. We're trying to justify this money expenditure. We're trying to justify how it is that we thought that we were going to get this big difference. We were convinced we were going to get this big difference, and we don't. That's what this podcast is for, is to tell you when you can reasonably expect to see a huge difference. There's people in here who want to buy external amplification. I got no problems with it.
And sometimes we have suggested that it would be a very good idea to get external amplification for some people's situations, because they have a situation that actually demands it. So
that's right.
We'll give it to you straight.
You know, but if you're going to come here and I'm not talking about you now, Tim, I'm talking about like theoretical you, and look for us to validate your purchase, we're just not going to do it. We're just not going to. And we're also not going to set people on the path of buying something where it's not going to give them an audible difference. If they want to buy it, like, I am going to buy this amplifier, am I going to hear a difference? We're going to tell you probably not. You might. And they're going to come right.
There might be an extreme situation, you know, an extremely loud peak, or you have your ear pressed right up against the tweeter and it does have a lower noise floor. But it's kind of at those two extremes.
So when we're talking about this stuff, just remember that. I mean, when these people are totally normal people, and they may actually believe exactly what they're saying, or they may be in the same boat that Rob and I were in at some point in our audioholics or audio career, where we were really wanting to believe it, you know, and really sort of kind of disappointed in the back of our heads. The only time, like I've said it before in this podcast a couple of times, the only time I've ever heard differences in amplification was when I was listening to a an ice amp versus a non-ice amp.
Right, right.
That was the
Yeah,
only
something where there's a measurable non-linearity in one of the amps, which then you would expect to hear a difference because the measurements say, well, there's a difference here.
That is the only time I've ever really heard a difference in amplification. The only time you can reasonably, and I think this answers a question down the line, that you can expect a difference in amplification is when you're running out of gas, essentially.
Right.
When
Yeah.
you're running out of gas. All right. So Ted's last question is, during his research, he came across Steinway Lindorf's fully digital signal path speaker system, where each speaker is connected using Ethernet cable, and all of the amplification and digital to analog conversion is done inside each individual speaker. Supposedly, this means a 0 dB noise floor and the very highest signal purity. That is exactly what they will tell you. Ted is familiar with self-powered speakers. M&K offers self-powered versions. Would these sound a lot better than this passive MP150s? Naturally, you'd have to use a pre-pro rather than a receiver, but what are the pros and cons of self-amplified speakers, and what way does the industry seem to be leading this subject? The industry has never, and I don't think ever will, go fully, at least in the home theater realm, until we go completely wireless with our speakers towards self-powered speakers. It's just not going to happen.
Which I kind of bemoan, because I actually think we're at a point now where we should be leaning more towards self-powered speakers, but the industry, it's awfully hard, because look at AV receivers, all have amplifiers built in, and there's all the speakers out there, and who's going to make the first move, and yeah, it's pretty tough to say.
And you end up, running the risk of every time somebody turning on the microwave in the house or getting a cell phone call or something like that, it gets picked up by your speakers because it's wireless. And then you have to have an outlet near every speaker. And while that's not that unreasonable in this day and age, now that code requires outlets every 3 stupid feet or something, there's outlets everywhere in this house. It's still something. And then you have individual volumes on each individual speaker, and it's theoretically possible that this is a good thing.
There is the way most studios are. Most studios are using self-powered monitors.
Self-powered monitors as well. That's right.
I mean, there are pluses and minuses because, I mean, actually, there was a good interview with Andrew Jones, because he's introducing some self-powered speakers in the ELAC Uni-Fi series. And he was pointing out what you can do is you have this particular woofer, you have this particular mid-range drive, you have this particular tweeter. They have their particular impedance graph that goes along with it. And if you make an amplifier that only drives one of those drivers, instead of it being one amplifier trying to power the entire speaker and having a passive crossover in it, you just have one amplifier that is specifically tuned to one driver, and you use digital signal processing to create all the filters so that, the woofer blends nicely with the mid-range and the mid-range blends nicely with the tweeter. That there are some advantages to that, because you just have more precision and that gives you more efficiency. Like, the tweeter just simply doesn't need as much power as the woofer does. It just doesn't. So you can use a lower wattage amplifier if it's only driving the tweeter, and then have a separate higher wattage amplifier that is only powering the woofer. So there's some efficiency there. But
not only that, you can use a lower quality amplifier as long as it's linear, or at least predictably non-linear in just the ranges that you're going to be using.
Just that range. Yeah,
so
it doesn't have to do the full range.
It doesn't have to do everything. It just has to do this bit. And if you know this amplifier that you can get for 55 cents from whomever, and shove it in here, and it has a little bit of a peak right here, well, you just DSP that bad boy out and you're good to go. And you can save a lot of money that way.
But on the downside, that all those amplifiers have to fit inside the speaker now. And sometimes, there are lots of studio monitors, and unfortunately this even applied to Emotiva's air motive powered versions, right? They have a noise floor. They have a noise floor because they used inexpensive amplifiers that were small enough to fit inside of the speaker itself.
That's right.
And they weren't super quiet amplifiers. It doesn't mean it can't be done, but the price goes up, just like you would expect. The price always goes up for a really low noise floor. So it's not as simple as this is always going to be better than that. It's still all the design parameters that go into any speaker system. It costs a certain amount of money to hit a certain level of quality and to get down to a certain efficiency and a certain level of size. So this Steinway Lindorf one is a little bit different because it's not just a self-powered speaker. It's one that also has a digital to analog converter built into it. So it's getting a digital signal from the processor. That's what's going in. Then it is converting it itself and amplifying it and playing it. So that's even an extra step further, which any normal receiver or normal pre-pro wouldn't even be able to hook up to it because it doesn't have the Ethernet digital signal output connected to it, which is why Steinway Lingdorf does it. It's kind of a proprietary thing. You have to buy all their equipment.
stuff. Yes, and
Yeah.
yes, they're going to tell you it's a 0 dB noise floor, and it very well may be. I don't know. They may
Well,
have spent...
to the speaker. But then the speaker gets a hold of it and has to amplify it.
Yeah,
there's a noise
for
floor.
sure.
There's a noise floor to
yeah.
that thing.
So and that's exactly it. It's like the 0 dB is all the way to the speaker, but it gets to the speaker, and at that point, it's got to do something with it.
Still gotta
and now
amplify
you've
it.
basically put all the receiver stuff that you normally had into the speaker.
That's right.
And you can't tell me that when you're looking at a small speaker, even a floor standing speaker, that you can get, all the stuff that you really want in there cheaply.
And the Steinway Lingdorf is not cheap.
No.
That's for darn sure.
Cheaply, so that it's ready for mass market. So whatever. Yes, Steinway Lindorf is doing all this. They're just basically like, we want people once they buy our stuff not to be able to buy anybody else's stuff. That's essentially what it comes down to. Same thing with Meridian. Meridian did the same thing, and we've had people on this podcast ask questions. I want my blah 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 broke, and I want to get a new receiver. How do I hook them up to my Meridian speakers? We're like, don't.
You can't.
You get new speakers is what you do.
Yeah.
He's like, oh, this makes sense. I'm like, yeah, we know. Okay, going on for new. That was all Ted. So Ted, enjoy your M&Ks. They're the best speakers I've ever been. Adrian on Facebook asked us not to judge him, but he wants to try vinyl. I do not judge you, sir.
We are not vinyl haters. The thing that we get upset about is when the vinyl people say vinyl is inherently better than every other audio format that could ever exist just because it happens to be on a vinyl record. It's
the only person I hate more than that person is that dude who takes vinyl and puts it on the reel-to-reel and claims that that's better. That dude is way worse than the regular vinyl guys. That guy right there, not good people. Anyways, he asks us not to judge him, but he wants to try vinyl. He's interested in older albums that came out before CDs, and there are lots of very cheap records available, so we'd like to start building a collection.
Also a great reason.
That is a good, and in fact, they look good on the wall. I got no problems with that. They're just aesthetically pleasing, and they're interesting. They're a conversation piece, and anything that's a collection, inherently, I think is something that's sort of I like. I like collecting like little things, unless they're like cats, in which case, no. He's considering the Audio Technica AT-LP150 as his first turntable. Any comments, advice, or warnings? Nope.
I've got a little bit of a one because this is basically Audio Technica's least expensive turntable.
It's probably one of those ones that you can plug like a USB cord into and
you can
record.
Yeah, it does have a USB output. The primary issue I have with it is it does not allow you to manually adjust the tracking force.
Oh, that's a problem.
So pretty much all turntables, there's the arm, of course, the arm that has the needle on the end of it, but on the opposite end of the needle, there's a counterweight. And the counterweight is there. Most of them, you can twist the counterweight and move it in or move it out, and that allows you to adjust how much force that needle is pressing down onto the record. Well, with the LP60, it's all just one contained arm. It's supposed to already be balanced out of the box. That means you can't change the cartridge. You can't change the needle, because if you change the cartridge and the needle, you might change the weight, and that would throw off the balance. So you're stuck with the cartridge and the needle that comes with it. It's not the end of the world by any means, but they have the LP120 right above it in its lineup, and that gives you the option to adjust the tracking force yourself. And the AT-LP120 from Audio Technica is widely regarded as a fantastic starter turntable. It's like certainly one of the most highly recommended for that exact reason. So to me,
what's
that's
the price
kind
point there?
Oh gosh, the 120. I'll have to look that up on Amazon. But yeah, I mean that's sort of the one that I would maybe point you towards. To me, it's worth the little bit extra money.
When I ran into a high-end store one time, I was talking with the owner, one of the people, and he was talking to me about vinyl, and of course gave me the whole "it's better than CD" spiel crap. Because the analog, it's a waveform, so it's infinite, and CDs are dots, so they're steps. Anyhow,
that's totme wrong. By the way, we're not going to get into it.
We're not going to get into that. That's a whole nother discussion. If somebody's going to ask us now, we'll have to do it next week. Anyway, he gave me the whole spiel, but he was like, "I've got a great, entry level turntable and stuff like that." And I think at that time it was like $200, which I felt like wasn't that bad, because at least at a high end store, you're going to get something where you can change the cartridge, or you can adjust things and stuff like that. So I would actually recommend going into a high-end store and saying, just thinking about this, everybody's doing it, it's all the rage. I was going to buy this Audio-Technica one. What do you suggest? And see what they come up with. Now, worst case scenario, you walk out of there with nothing. But the guy I was talking to in Jacksonville seemed to be pretty reasonable. So what's the price on that?
Yeah, so the LP120 on Amazon, they have it for $299, but you can find it for like $250. 260 somewhere in there. I will say the LP160 is all the way down at $100, so I can see why that is very enticing. Yeah, it could be as much as 3 times the cost to go up to the LP120. So, yeah, I mean, like I said, just be aware of the limitations. That's all. If you're fine with that limitation, then go for it, right? But I'm just saying I might spring for the 120 if it were me. That's all.
Yeah. And I might, before I did that, at least run by the high-end store and see if they've got anything. Just in case. They might have something. They'll have some beautiful ones that are like 10 grand, which are always nice to look at. Yeah. All right. He also asked somewhat tongue-in-cheek, but he's always wondered why we never talk about what hi-fi reviews or articles.
Yeah, What Hi-Fi is a website. They're out of the UK, aren't they?
I have no
Pretty
clue.
sure they're out of the UK.
They're a magazine, aren't they? A magazine too?
Yeah,
magazine?
But I like all other magazines, I think they're just largely online now.
Yeah.
I don't talk about them much because the amount of BS I would have to sift through to get to the parts that are true makes it challenging. That's why.
I have perused many of these websites, and they all kind of run together for me. And you can, you read the first couple sentences, you're like, oh yeah, this is
What Hi-Fi are. I mean, the thing is, they have individual reviewers, so it does come down to the individual reviewer. But largely, you'll find the stuff about all Yamahas sound a certain way, all Denon and Marantz's sound a certain way. They just take things as just rote. All external amplifiers are better than all AV receivers. There's no AV receiver that could compare with a good integrated. Like they're still stuck in that mode of thinking.
External power supplies will somehow make your everything sound better than having
subwoofers are undesirable. If you could, you just have all large speakers. Like
full range speakers. 7 full range speakers is better than bookshelves and a couple of subs.
Two speakers are better than 7. They're still stuck in that mode of thinking. So that's why I don't. They
should get back on the quadraphonic sound bandwagon. I feel like
mono. Let's all go back to mono. One driver, no crossovers, just a single full range driver.
It's usually a single full range driver in a very tall cabinet with a folded horn inside of it in order to get any sort of bass out of it. And it's that paper one with the weird little hat around the center of it.
The whizzer cone.
Yeah.
The whizzer cone.
Oh, man. That's literally
the thing that flutters in the breeze to give you the sense of trouble.
But I've heard that speaker I've heard a speaker with that driver once, and they were singing the praises of the speaker, singing praises of the driver, singing praises of everything, and put vinyl on that. And I got up and I walked out. I just flat out. I didn't make it 10 seconds in that song. I was like,
dear.
That sounds like garbage. I'm getting out of here. Worst thing I ever heard. All right. Justin, not Bieber on Twitter. Would we rather have Ascend Acoustics Sierra-2s or the Sierra Towers with the NRT tweeter? The NRT tweeter is the one before the RAL. Is that right?
Yeah, it's their dome tweeter that they use. There's me saying dome again for everyone who enjoyed the way I say dome.
How did you say dome?
I dome. I over enunciate it.
I mean, your Canadian thing.
Yeah, that's right. So.
All right. Sierra-2s. I guess he's talking about
those are the bookshelf.
The bookshelves, and that's with the RAL.
With the RAL, ribbon tweeter.
Or the Sierra Towers. Well, first of all, how big is the room?
That's right.
That's pretty much.
How far away are you sitting?
How far away are you sitting? How big's the room? That will determine. All things being equal, I'm probably going to go with the RAL ribbon tweeter. That being said, you're in a big room, sitting far away, probably going to go with the tower.
Yeah, I'm going to say if you're 12 feet or closer and your room is 3,000 cubic feet or less, then I would opt for the Sierra-2. If I'm more than 12 feet away or my room is larger than 3,000 cubic feet, I'd go for the tower. That's my answer.
There you go. Thought you'd trip us up on that one, did you? Not a chance, Justin, not Bieber. All right. So one day, I mean, it's never going to happen, but one day, wouldn't it be great if Justin Bieber asked us a question? Just like full on.
That would be great. I really doubt that will ever happen.
Just imagine how Justin, not Bieber, would feel. He'd be like, dang. All right. Adriano I don't know how that would make him feel at all. I think he should feel pretty good because it had to be because of him. All right, Adriano saw a video presentation for some speaker technology called Audio Pixels. Some interesting claims were made in their video presentation. Is it actually theoretically possible for an array of hundreds or thousands of miniature drivers to actually create low frequencies in SPLs to rival a traditional subwoofer, or is it just a pie in the sky stuff? Well, we've had line array speakers for quite some time, and
we've got Yamaha's digital sound projector technology,
which does the same thing. And basically, it's all these little tweeters that are in a huge line, and essentially, there's a lot of surface area. There's a lot of driver area there. Now, can they make all that bass? They can make a lot of it. They get pretty close.
All that matters is displacement. It is displacement of the air. That's all that matters. It doesn't really matter how you get there. It's more complicated to do with a ton of little drivers than with one big one. But all that matters is displacing the air. So as long as you can do that.
All I say is this. There are a lot of high-end speaker companies that make line arrays with all these little drivers in them, and they usually sell another speaker that sits right behind it that looks suspiciously like a subwoofer. They call it something else, but this is basically what it is.
So this Audio Pixels in particular. Now, first of all, they're primarily looking for investors. Have been since, what is it, 2006, I think, something like that? I don't know the exact year, but anyway, they have been for a while. They say they are still pre-production. Like they not only pre-production, they haven't figured out how to produce their thing yet. So they're still at that stage. So basically, it's kind of still theoretical or prototype. And when they are talking about bass, they were talking about how proud they were that they got down to 250 hertz. So we're not talking subwoofer bass. I mean, 250 hertz is bass. It's unequivocally in the bass spectrum.
It's in the bass. I don't know if it's something to write home about.
It's it's
like getting a participation medal in bass. Be honest
and what they're largely looking to use their technology for is like cell phones and tablets, where it makes a ton of sense that if you could have something that can play louder with greater precision than what we currently have built in, then absolutely it would totally make sense to come up with a technology like this. So yeah, but what they're using teeny tiny little membranes. It's very thin because they don't need a voice coil. They just apply the electric current directly to the membranes, and the membranes just start to wiggle back and forth. And they're teeny tiny, but there's a whole bunch of them. And you can array them in pretty much any shape and size and number that you want. And then they're all just moving along to vibrate the air. So, yeah, there's no reason why this can't work. You could put a gazillion of them together and build yourself a subwoofer, because a tweeter can play 20 hertz. It just, it's a small surface area, only moving back and forth so much. It's only displacing so much air, but it can vibrate at 20 hertz. There's no reason it physically couldn't. So you just need a whole bunch of them.
20 hertz. Yeah. I mean, if you try hard enough, like this. Yeah. See? Yeah. So I don't know if I give any money to that company yet, but someone should. Someone should, just not me.
No, I mean, there's nothing about it where I say, oh, there's no way this could possibly work. Like, yeah, of course it could work. It's a bunch of teeny tiny little drivers. That's all.
Jim is temporarily without a sub in an all-ELAC B6 surround sound setup in an average size living room. I don't know what average size means these days. Because average size living rooms are pretty freaking huge. And even if they're small themselves, they're usually open to a bunch of other stuff.
There's that. That's the really problem.
Anyways, so while not having a sub, he left his speaker set to large after running Odyssey.
Okay.
I can understand why you did that.
Of course.
But I'm just going to say that was maybe not a good idea.
Well, otherwise that entire LFE channel goes nowhere. If you say I have no subwoofer, then it doesn't even let you set your speakers to anything other than large. So the only way around this would be to trick the AV receiver and say, yes, I do have a subwoofer, when in fact you physically do not. So I get this. This is the correct setup as far as that goes.
Yeah. So while watching Ant-Man at about -10 dB, got some very bad sounds from his speakers during a couple of bass-heavy scenes. It sounded like, and this is a quote here, the woofer cones were about to pop out of their boxes.
that might not be too far from the truth.
I think it's exactly what was trying to happen. So hopefully they didn't suffer any permanent damage. You check the Odyssey EQ graphic, and the whole low bass range and top treble range as well were boosted way up. He disabled Odyssey and had no more issues during the movie, even though there were several more bass-heavy action scenes. He does have dynamic EQ on and dynamic volume off on advice from us.
Yep.
In a situation where no sub is being used, shouldn't Odyssey only cut and not boost bass frequencies on the main speakers during its calibration? Isn't that the general advice for people doing manual EQing, as to not force speakers to try and do something they aren't physically capable of, like loud, low bass? That is what we say.
Yeah, I agree with you, Jim. That would be the preferable way to automatically set
Odyssey does not do that. I see that in every single one of my calibrations. When I do it here, I look at it afterwards, and it boosts up all the bass on all my speakers. It does that. It does that. I know it has a set. It doesn't do it infinitely. It only goes to a certain level.
Yeah.
So there's two things that are coming into play here. First of all, should Odyssey be boosting? Not to this level, perhaps. But also, should your speakers try to be reproducing sounds they can't physically do? And the answer to that question is also no.
Yeah.
So
but some do, like we've seen KEF speakers have done that as well.
KEF speakers have definitely done that.
Yeah.
And they're trying to reproduce stuff they just can't do, and there should be a crossover there that stops them from doing it.
Just
there
a filter.
Here. Yeah, just a filter is all it takes. Just a filter in the crossover to stop, to say, okay, anything lower than this, don't even bother.
Just start to roll it off.
Just roll that bad boy off, and we'll see you next week. And that's not what's happening in these speakers. That's a design choice, I suppose, on his part. He wants those people that are trying to get a little bit of extra bass out of their speakers to get as much as they can. I suppose. I don't know. Maybe he just doesn't think that that's something that he should do, that you should be rolling things off with your subwoofer or with your crossover setting in your AV receiver. I can't tell you. So there's two people at fault here, and one of them is ELAC, and the other one is Odyssey.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know if it's directly Odyssey, because again, the whole thing about setting speaker sizes and setting crossovers ultimately comes down to the manufacturer and not even Odyssey. However, Odyssey is in charge of the actual EQ settings.
Yes.
So somewhere in there, it is saying, all right, you went ahead and set these speakers to large. I'm going to try and get you to flat frequency response come hell or high water, apparently. Yeah. This speaker clearly can't do it, but I'm going to go ahead and boost it like crazy in the bass to try and get back to linear flat frequency response. On top of that, dynamic EQ is going to boost the bass even further, because you were 10 decibels below full reference volume. That means it is boosting the bass even more to try and keep the things that, like, let's say at full reference volume, there was a bass note at 65 decibels. Now you're 10 decibels below that. So if everything just stayed exactly where it is, you'd be down at 55, which means you probably can't hear it at all. Dynamic EQ is going to go ahead and boost that back up to 65 dB just to try and keep it audible. So you have multiple things compounding on you here to create the problem you described. But I'm in agreement with you. It would be far wiser to just say, sorry, we can't get you to linear on this speaker. We're not even going to try. But unfortunately, they didn't.
Yeah, and I don't necessarily fault Odyssey all that much for boosting, because I think there is a case made for boosting a little bit here and there.
Oh, sure.
You don't really know how, I mean, the interaction between one speaker and another, how those things are going to interact.
And the speaker and the room.
That's right. And when you're boost a little bit on one speaker, it could very well, even out the sound for a lot of your space. In which case, you don't want to take away the ability for them to boost necessarily. What you do want to do is make sure that something like this isn't happening. And frankly, the onus is on everybody in the room, to be honest. It's partially on the speaker manufacturer. It's on Odyssey to say, listen, we're just getting distortion at this point.
Right.
We should stop. And it's on you to make sure that you're setting things up properly as well, which you have set them up as best you can, considering.
Yeah. No, he followed all the instructions in the manual too, because the manual will say if you don't have a subwoofer, set your front speakers to large, and so it's not like he didn't follow the directions. That's really not his fault.
Yeah. So those very bad sounds were probably the woofer bottoming out.
Yeah.
That's probably what you're hearing,
or getting darn close to it anyway.
Yeah. So you will know if it's if it's
Hopefully it was mostly port noise, because port noise can sound awful.
Yeah, that's
really
true
can.
too.
So hopefully that's what it was, because if it was, no damage at all. It just sounds awful when that port really starts chuffing.
And
So
if it didn't if you didn't let it go for too long, it's very possible
yes,
that you're not going to have any damage anyways. So well, you would know if you have damage afterwards because things will sound bad. This would not be a question in your mind. All right. Matt G. How are we doing time all right then? Matt G. listened to Rob's answers last week and is leaning towards 3 Sierra 1s and upgrading the surrounds later on. But he also priced the setup Rob recommended 3 CMT 340 SEs and a pair of CBM 170s. Those are all from Ascend, of course.
That's right.
And seriously, dude, how much money are they paying you? How much better are the Sierras than the,
I wish
than the 340s and the 170s? This room is 13 by 25, and he's also open to a kitchen and foyer with wide openings and no doors.
In other words, he's got a very large space.
Yeah, well,
as
it
far
does.
as pressurization goes.
Yeah, but that's going to be more for your subwoofer than it's going to be
More
for
for the
speakers.
sub, but as we've been talking about the past couple of weeks, there is that range, like 500 hertz and down, where it does affect the speaker choice there. Some bookshelf speakers can start to struggle even in the 500, 250 hertz range, where they're definitely still playing. So I mean, how much better are the Sierra ones than the CMT 340s? I mean, there's no way to put a number on that or something like that. It's one of the things I will say is the Sierra 1 can be upgraded. You can upgrade it later. You can upgrade the tweeter and the associated crossover, or you can upgrade it all the way to the ribbon tweeter and the new woofer that goes along with it and the new crossover that goes with all of that. So, of course, that's just an option going on there. But, I mean, it's a higher quality tweeter. It's a higher quality woofer. Objectively, they have slightly lower distortion. That's really what it comes down to. In the measurements, they have slightly lower distortion. So they don't sound identical, but they don't sound worlds apart either. It's it's a small degree, but objectively they have lower distortion. That's what's going on.
Anyways, he's also looked at some EMP techs online. He didn't even know that brand existed. He must have just started listening to the podcast. He said, would their towers and huge center be better suited to filling his large open room?
They wouldn't be out of place.
They would just do just fine in there. That would have been, if I had been on the podcast last week, that's what I would have recommended.
And we did. We said you would.
Yeah, good. That's what I would have recommended. That's kind of the way to go. On the other hand, he may eventually move the home theater to a smaller room with a door. Should that be a factor in this decision? And my answer to that would be no. Not really. Oh. I don't think so, to be honest with you, because you always turn a speaker like this down. I don't necessarily think you need towers no matter which way you go with this, because you're not sitting hugely far away, 13 by 25. You're not going to be sitting hugely far away. So you don't need to get a big bassy speaker. What you need is reasonable speakers, which any one of these bookshelves that we're talking about would do fine in a small room.
And you'll want to cross them over to subwoofers.
You will have to have subwoofers. That has to happen. That's a thing. Yeah. Did you want to say something about that? Small theater to smaller room?
No, I'm largely in agreement there. I mean, you can always turn something down. You can have a gigantic subwoofer that filled up your old space, move it into the small room, and you'll just have to turn it way down. That's all. So, largely the same for speakers, and a little bit of EQ can solve if they're overblowing a little bit in that 500 hertz range or something.
So apparently all this is moot because he's been emailing you anyways, and Matt pulled the trigger on a pair of Sierra 1s and matching center and satin cherry. They were available as B-stock, so he even saved $150. He's still a little anxious to actually hear them in his large room, but in addition to Rob, he described his room to Dina at Ascend, who is this is the same guy who's aware of us, and she agrees that he'll be fine. Yeah. Well, what is she going to say? She's got a financial stake in this. We don't.
No, but she could have pointed him towards their towers or their CMT 340s.
Yeah.
So, we were asking about seating distance and, plans for the future and all of that. So it all came together and we're like, the Sierra ones are not going to be out of place here.
He says we've said before that output capabilities can be a case-by-case situation, and it's not as simple as all tower speakers being able to play louder than all bookshelf speakers. But how is a relatively small speaker like Sierra 1 able to outperform some towers? Is it design, the construction, the components used? In other words, what could allow 2 drivers in a small box to outperform 4 or 5 drivers in a large box? Mostly the ability of the speaker designer and the price point at which the speaker is set.
And the components that are used as a result of all of that.
That's what it comes with. The price point directly affects how much money they can put into that speaker. So a well-designed speaker in a small box will outperform in most aspects a poorly designed speaker in a large box. Now, bass wise, you can probably get a lot more bass out of that big box just because of physics.
Probably, yeah.
But even in a big box like the Elemental Design towers I reviewed a million years ago, in order to get even to 60 hertz, you had to shove those bad boys in the corner. I mean, it was crazy. And they told me that afterwards. They were like, "Oh yeah." I was like, "I measured these things. There's no way you're getting to whatever you claimed." And they're like, "Oh yeah, we did it in the corner."
Yep.
Like, okay.
Yeah. Again, as far as output capability, it all comes back to displacement. And there's two. Well, no, there's more than two ways, but there's two primary ways that you can displace the air. You can either have a large surface area, right? So that's going to displace however much air it's in contact with. Or if you have a smaller surface area, you can just move it farther back and forth, right? So when you have these more expensive drivers, maybe it's a smaller surface area, but like the driver that's in the Sierra 1, it can move like 2 inches out and 2 inches in. Like, that's not even an exaggeration. It has a long distance that it can travel. So it can displace more air than even a physically larger surface area driver that can only move 1/4 of an inch out and 1/4 of an inch in. So it all comes back to how much air can you displace. So if you can move a lot farther, then you don't have to have as much surface area to equal the same thing.
Right. And honestly, a well-designed speaker and crossover and everything else that goes with it, I've just seen it happen over and over again where you've got this big box and it seems like a lot of drivers and everything else, but only really 2 of those drivers are playing, and the other 2 drivers just passive radiators. And so much money went into just the physical components of the box, just the box itself.
Yep.
That takes away from what they can spend on drivers. So having the smaller box and requiring your consumer to build to buy it or build a stand or figure out some way to get it to the right level just saves you enough money, so much money that you can really spend that on components, and that makes a lot of difference. That's why I tend to prefer bookshelf speakers these days, because for the most part, unless you're in a really big room and you need that, you can get a lot more bang for your buck. Of course, you have to buy a stand, but stands are cheap. I mean, if you want a nice stand,
you can make your own.
Make your own. That's right.
Yeah.
Lastly, he says in the future, when he adds the surrounds, will the CBM 170s be timbre matched enough, despite having a different tweeter? He'd rather not have to spend the extra money on more Sierra 1s if he doesn't have to. I thought all Ascend Acoustics were sort of kind of timbre matched.
Well, I mean, they're fairly close because they're all aiming at pretty darn neutral, pretty darn linear frequency response.
Right.
None of them are going for a particular house sound. Like some other brands do have their particular house sound that they're going for, which is fine.
Nothing wrong with
That's
that.
what you want. So yeah, because they're aiming at very neutral, very linear, they sound far more similar than different. How picky are you? Right? Because I'm not going to say that the CBM 170s sound identical to the Sierra 1s. If they did, why would the Sierra 1s exist? So they're not identical, but they're in a different position in your room. They're, I'll say, more similar than they are different. So if you're super picky, then maybe it won't be close enough. But I got great news. The CBM 170s are free 2-way shipping. So give them a try, because if they aren't good enough, send them on back. And it's free.
Yeah, Ascend wasn't free for a while.
They weren't.
Right?
They weren't doing free 2, and they're only doing it on 3 models right now.
This is one of them. Okay,
But
that's
the
right.
CBM 170s are one of them. So give it a try.
All right, Infinite Gary. This is going to be long, isn't it?
Yeah, we can race through these.
Mostly you can, because he's literally talking to you. Just give me your phone number. Anyways,
oh God, no.
Anyways, Gary has never heard the Sierra Horizons or any other speakers with ribbon tweeters, but is familiar with the Revell Voice 2s with the beryllium tweeters. Since Rob has Sierras with ribbons, can you describe the difference in sound between the 2 tweeters? Have you heard the beryllium tweeters?
Yeah, I've heard the Revels.
I thought you liked the Revels.
I've heard the Revels, and I've heard the Focals.
I thought you thought that those sounded better, if I remember correctly from what you said, a little bit better than the Sierras, but not nearly enough to justify the cost. Is that what I remember?
No, I mean, like with the focals with the Electra BE series, I thought in like just out and out sheer detail, right? That maybe they were a hair better there, but then it's like, but the overall realism sound of the Sierras with the RAL tweeters is maybe a hair better. Like it's what I've said about all of these. So talking about the Revel Ultima 2 series and the Focal Electra BE series and the Ascend Acoustics Sierra RAL series, I put all three of those very much neck and neck with each other. Like I don't think they all sound identical necessarily, but if you hear one of them, you have a pretty decent idea of the overall level of quality, right?
Right.
So we talk about sometimes at different price points and different quality levels that there's sort of little jumps along the way where you probably wouldn't mistake a nice $2,000 per pair bookshelf speaker for a $200 per pair bookshelf speaker. You just probably wouldn't mistake one for the other. There's a jump in quality that goes on there. So I put all three of these at a very similar level of quality. I couldn't tell you the exact sound differences, but objectively, the RALs have the fastest transient response. They stop faster than even the beryllium tweeters. So,
And really, it doesn't make any difference what he heard because it's not your ears and it's not your theater.
yeah.
So
No, but it's just I don't think you'd think they're a big downgrade or a big upgrade. I
there
think
you
they're
go.
very
They sound
much
pretty
a
close.
lateral move.
Gary's theater walls are covered with Gulford of Maine cloth in both moleskin and chocolate. Moleskin.
That's just the name of the fabric.
I understand, but that is
yeah.
not an attractive name. Is it
It's
brown?
supposed to look like moleskin.
What does moleskin look like? Is it brown, dark
It's
brown,
pretty
black,
gray. It's gray.
gray?
It's quite
I have
gray.
no idea what a mole looks like.
Yes.
So how does the moleskin color compare to Munsell gray, and is a good color for theater walls to be? Gray is good color.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a little bit more reddish brown than Munsell gray.
A little hairier.
That
Got a little hair
directly.
on
In the Guilford of Maine lineup, in the 701 fabric, which is what he's using, which is describing the weave of it. And the reason a lot of people use that is because it's quite acoustically transparent. Good choice for acoustic panels if you're building your own. They have one that is called silver neutral and one that is called medium gray. Both of those basically fall on the Munsell scale. They're very, very close. And judging by the names, not surprising. Medium gray, neutral silver, they're pretty darn Munsell neutral. The moleskin is a little bit more reddish brown. So is it a good choice for theater? Absolutely. It's gray, man. It's a totally great choice. The
My
chocolate
theater
I'm
is
sure
orange.
brown.
So
Yeah.
why are you asking us?
Well, we talked about Munsell gray last week. That's why
Oh,
this
okay,
came
there
up.
you
We
go.
talked about it in
All
paint.
right. His LG OLED defaults to BT 1886, which I think was the year that 3D was first invented and shot and buried underground before it rose up like a zombie in the 70s. Under the I like that one. I'm going to try to remember that. Under the gamma setting, okay, it defaults to BT 1886 under the gamma setting when watching SDR content. During the Value Electronics Shootout,
They recently had the shootout. No, surprise, surprise. LG's OLED TV won the shootout. No, shocking, absolutely no one. Yes.
They specified having calibrated all the displays to 2.4 gamma. And according to an interview of several calibrators done by Kris Heinowen,
Heinonen. It's not
whatever, Heinonen. I don't know.
It's like Heineken, but Heinonen instead of kin.
I don't even like Heineken. It's not my favorite beer. It's very overrated as far as I'm concerned. Different people target different gamma settings depending on the environment and the situation, which is absolutely true. So what is actually correct? Is the LG's BT 1886 default a good choice?
So basically, 1886 is the EOTF, electro-optical transfer function version of gamma for standard dynamic range content. So when they started developing all this high dynamic range content stuff, and Dolby came out with their electro-optical transfer function, their BT 2084 that they have now. So the difference is it's saying, here's what the signal says, and that corresponds to exactly this much light output. It's not just a variable curve anymore. It's this is the signal equals this many nits. So BT 1886 is sort of the answer to that in the standard dynamic range. And that has become the new standard because it's a true standard now. They can say you have exactly this much ambient light in your mastering studio. You calibrate the display to exactly this electro-optical transfer function, and now all the displays look the same when you're making the content. Therefore, if your home environment also has the same setup. Let's use the same thing. You're seeing it as accurately as possible. But of course, some people have a little bit more ambient light, a little bit less ambient light, a display that isn't exactly the same as a master reference display, something like that.
Right.
So yeah, we have these gamma settings. Normally, they're somewhere between 2.4 and 2.2. The higher the numerical value basically just means it stays dark longer. So a 2.4 gamma means that there's absolute black, and then it just gets a teeny tiny bit brighter, teeny tiny bit brighter, teeny tiny bit brighter. 2.2 gets a little bit brighter than 2.4 as you go up that scale. So if you have a brighter room with more ambient light, it makes sense to target something like 2.2. If you have a pitch black room, it makes sense to target 2.4. If you have exactly what they have in a mastering studio, which is supposed to be like 10% luminance value of a 10% full white field on your screen, right? It's 10% of 10%. If that's exactly what you have, then BT1886 will look perfect. So, yeah.
So he had a preliminary calibration done on his TV, and his calibrator discovered that adjusting the color management system resulted in contouring.
Yeah, so contouring is like when you're looking at, let's say, a blue sky, and instead of it being smooth transitions of blue, different shades of blue, you actually see kind of like little separations, little bands of color. That's contouring.
Yeah, that's exciting. They're also they were basically stuck with the factory settings, which, to be fair, are already pretty close to accurate, but there's still room for improvement. That combined with there being no calibration standard for HDR10, and there's very little that Gary's calibrator could do. I bet he was depressed about that, but he was happy to charge you for them about it. So what's the deal here? Are calibrators obsolete, or do the displays need to be updated so that calibrators can make adjustments without messing up the factory default image? Well, this always happens when we come out with a brand new display technology. This happens quite often, where you end up with the calibrators complaining that they have very little control over the brand new displays that they come out, and it's for the same
or the control that they have isn't accurate the way they would like it to be.
That's right, and that happens. I mean, I remember we've talked about this so many times. The Westinghouse 1080p display, one of the first ones that came out, calibrators were like, you can get it close, but you can't get it perfect.
Yep.
No matter what you do, can't be done.
Sony had a whole bunch of projectors that just didn't allow you to adjust the color, and that was Sony, for Pete's sake. They had plenty of displays before that allowed it. So.
And they'll have they have had plenty of displays afterwards and projectors after that will allow you. But these first ones that come out, this is what you'll have to deal with. You'll have to deal with stuff like this where you're like, it looks pretty dang good. It could technically look a little bit better,
right?
But we can't do it because they didn't allow us to. There may be someday, some way, somebody finds out there's a service menu in there that they can get into,
or there could be a firmware update that improves the situation.
Could be. There's no reason why they. There's no reason why they couldn't do that. Will they do it? Probably not. But they could.
Yeah. And the HDR10 situation, that ain't anybody's fault. That's not LG's fault. That's not your calibrator's fault. That is them picking a standard that had no standards for calibration associated with it. It's a problem.
Yeah, it's a problem. It's a problem that has no answer right now. Okay, a review of the Anthem D2V processor, which is the processor that he's using, mentions that it's actually able to pass through a 4K video signal via HDMI so long as there's no copy protection.
Right.
So is there any application that this where this capability would benefit Gary? If you have
camcorder?
No, come on, you can do better than that. Any up converting 4K Blu-ray player.
Right. Up converting 4K Blu-ray. Yeah, because it won't have HDCP 2.2.
Nope. You'll be able to pass that
1.4. And the reason that it says it's capable of passing the signal is because it has 10.2 gigabits per second of bandwidth. It doesn't have the full 18, but it's got 10.2. 10.2 is enough to pass a 4K resolution signal as long as it's 8-bit color, with 420 chroma subsampling. That's, if you're sticking with that and you're not going up to 10-bit color or 60 frames a second or 444 chroma sampling. If you're not going to any of those other things that exceed 10.2 gigabits per second, then it's just a pipe. It's just a thing passing along bits. So yeah, it can pass along 4K, but it doesn't have HDCP 2.2.
Yeah, so anything that can up converts to 4K right now would work.
All right.
There you go.
Yes.
What, would you want to do that? Nope.
Your display is going to do it anyway.
I don't think so. Did I already do this? Okay. Gary was watching the Blu-ray version 1080p of Back to the Future. His OLED was, of course, up converting to 4K. Gary says that looked like it was shot on a camcorder. Why? Is that because of the 1080p to 4K up conversion? Is it
No.
because the movie was originally shot on film?
No.
No. I'm sorry. That was meaner than I meant to sound. Would an Ultra HD release still look like the movie was shot on video? As long
Possibly.
as you don't turn off whatever it's frame interpolation you have going on that TV right now, because that's what's making it look like that.
Yeah, yeah.
So
And LGs, I know they do the separate thing. They have the, I don't know what name they put it under because, of course, the names always keep changing. But they have like the anti-blur and the anti-judder are like two separate things, right? And one of those sometimes people turn off because, like, I think it's the anti-blur where they basically just start inserting black frames.
Yeah.
Right. So they don't actually create any new frames. They just start inserting black frames so that hopefully you won't get, one frame blurring into the next.
Yeah.
But the anti-judder is a big, big problem because that's the one that starts to create frames that never existed in the original signal. It tries to fill in the gaps because you're starting with 24 frames and it's showing you, I think, 120.
Yeah.
So it can make up 4 extra frames that never existed in the original signal in between all the frames that actually do. You got to have the anti-judder turned all the way down, and sometimes even the anti-blur gets
Anti-blur makes a lot more sense to me. I've always said that it should technically work.
It should. Sometimes, though, I've seen some anti-blur ones that even they make it look a little bit weird. Try turning all of that down to 0. You might start getting a tiny little bit of blur. I don't know. But,
I don't know why
try turning it all down.
OLED shouldn't have that, right? I thought it was more.
It's still sample and hold. You know, it's still showing the image. It's not flashing it like a plasma did. It's still sample and hold. So it's still possible to get some motion blur.
I miss plasma.
I know.
All right. Jerry thanks us for our answers, and will now be spending a lot of time transcoding his HD DVD rips using our advice. He was on 2 weeks ago, right?
That's right. I went down the rabbit hole. I talked to him. Oh, I sure did.
Because we were talking about that night, and we kind of figured out basically what the problem was. So...
Yeah, VC1 does seem to be a problem with Plex. That seems to be the case. So transcoding it over to H.264, even though you end up with a bigger file than the original, but that's the way it seems to work.
So he asks, Rob lives in an apartment, right?
I do.
How is he able to use his dual, it doesn't say dual here, I'm going to add that, SVS PC13 Ultras without annoying his neighbors?
I don't listen at night. That's number one. And our building basically has a rule, you make as much noise as you want during the day. Nobody's going to say boo. And then at night, just be respectful. So I do that. So that's number one. It's not a problem. Number two, I have a small room with a door. And I close that door, which means I need very little output to pressurize that room. Because that room is like 12 by 13 and a half, basically. It's a teeny tiny little room. It doesn't need a lot of output to be pressurized. So what I've done, I tried turning it up as loud as I want. I don't listen at full reference volume. I have it a little bit below that, but I've turned it up as loud as I would ever want it. Close the door. I've gone outside. I can't hear anything out in my hallway. I can't hear anything the floor below me. Of course, I'm not in the apartment below me, so I don't know, maybe a little bit's getting through. I also have my subs damped. I have them on Auralex Gramma risers so that they're not in direct contact with the floor. So I've taken all the steps I can. If I left the doors to that room open and I was pressurizing my whole apartment, I'm darn sure I would start getting some neighbor complaints.
Yeah, for sure. You should. Aren't you friendly with your neighbors? You friendly with your neighbors?
Not the downstairs guy. The downstairs guy is a little bit loony. I don't talk to him.
Loony Canadians? They're like super polite, but like say crazy polite things to you. Like
he's a little loony.
Would you like some tea? No. What? No, we're on the bus. So I was saying your sideways neighbors are one of the ones that are near you. Couldn't you say, listen, I'm going to turn this up as loud as I want, just so I know how much sound is getting into your room?
There's that. But at the same time, I've never had a complaint ever. So I'm really going to worry about it.
John W. over on Facebook, he asks, at what size does a room start to eat the speakers? Is it a matter of seating distance, desired output level is a rule of thumb as to when it would be better to use a tower plus subwoofers versus bookshelf speakers plus subwoofers? But both plus subwoofers is important there.
Oh, yes.
It depends on the output of the efficiency of the speaker and how close you're sitting to it, the size of the room does definitely take, but I don't care how big your room is. If you're within, arm's distance of your speakers, you're gonna be able to use bookshelf speakers no matter what. Have you ever been? Have you ever been to either CES or CDA or any of those kind of shows?
No, I haven't been to the trade shows.
There's
No.
always that one booth where they're like, "Come here, our bookshelf speakers," and they sit
Uh-huh.
you in a chair and they put them like
2.5 feet away.
Not no, closer, like Bose, like demo
Yeah,
close
yeah.
to you, like right freaking there. You're like, people are sitting there going, you can see them going, can I get out of the chair now? Because these
Really
speakers are really
clear.
close. Yeah.
Look at these headphones.
I don't know that there's a simple, like Rob said with the Sierras earlier. He said that
Yeah.
if you're sitting 12 feet away or the size of the room, vice
And
versa sort of thing.
I mean, yeah, of course it's going to be a bit case by case because I mean, you could have the crazy bookshelf speaker that plays louder than the majority of towers out there. It could be done, but in a more
You could have a Klipsch, right? Or
sure,
any sort of horn-loaded speaker. You're like, man,
yeah,
that thing gets
one
really
of those
loud.
big, compression-loaded driver
Yeah.
things. So yeah, there are the exceptions, but in a sort of general term, I'm like, yeah, if you're sitting more than about 12 feet away, if your room's larger than about 3,000 cubic feet, to me, that's where you're starting to get into the realm of, all right, in that 500 hertz bass range, above 3,000 cubic feet, you're probably going to start wanting some more output. If you're sitting farther away than 12 feet, you're probably going to start wanting some more output. So that's sort of my rule of thumb. It's not going to apply to every single situation, but I think that's fairly sort of safe guidelines.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely has to be taken case by case. I mean, we can come
Yeah.
up with sort of a rule of thumb, and we've done that before in here. Just like my rule of thumb is, you want to, and this is, I can hear Ray already typing. Yeah, you want the projection screen. It's about a 1.1, 1.2 gain, right? It's like no, because it's not universal, and that's why it's
Right.
called a rule of thumb.
Yeah.
So this is just the way we do things. So we're going to look at the output of the speaker. We're going to look at the size of your room. We're going to go, that's probably not going to work. Or, you're going to be fine. Like, we've been talking Ted down for like 2 months.
I know.
You
could have gotten Sierra-2s, Ted. You could have. You could have mounted those on the wall with a wall mount. He was all worried about them rear ported. I'm like, they need 3 inches. You can get a wall mount that gives you 3 inches. It's not hard on a shelf.
All right. So, Nick asks,
Ted.
have we heard of Dr. Earl Geeds?
I think it's Geddes.
Geddes?
I think so.
I don't know. Dr. Earl. I have a hard time taking him seriously already, Dr. Earl. Anyways, I'm sure he's a very smart man.
Because of his first name? What is he supposed
I don't know. It's not my fault. I name him Earl.
judging a guy on his
I
first
judge
name?
people all kinds of things. What's a first name? I can judge them on anything. I see somebody walk by, they got they got dirty pants, and I'm like, that's the first thing I think. I'm sorry, it's just where I am. All right. Anyways, Dr. Earl Geddes, I should say Dr. Geddes, that sounds more. Anyways, approach to setting up multiple subwoofers. He usually advocates 3 subwoofers in a room. One that's very capable of going down to around 20 hertz, and the other 2 less capable. I've never in my life thought what I needed in my life was less capable subwoofers. But go on. You convinced me, Dr. Geddes. He also has some software that can be used to optimize things. Aha. It is free to use if you purchase his subwoofers, which he could be happy to sell you less capable subwoofers. But it costs $400 if you use your own subs.
And that's actually a little misleading because you can't get the software. He holds on to it. You take measurements and send the measurements to him. He uses the software that he developed and charges you $400 for it.
And then what that happens? I mean, how do you use it then? Where do you?
He sends you
stick it
back
into?
correction files to put into the like a mini DSP or a Behringer
okay.
feedback destroyer, whatever your choice is there. Yeah.
Or also for a small fee, you can have him help with his software and other advice. So isn't that part of the $400?
I don't know. It was if you have his speakers then, but not his subwoofers, then it's like $200 instead.
Whatever.
Yeah.
In a rectangular room, the Dr. Tool approach using 2 or 4 subs placed, as we always suggest, is the easiest approach. However, in a non-rectangular room, it seems like this Dr. Geddes approach might be a better option. What do we think? I think I don't understand the idea of having one sub that goes down to 20 hertz and not wanting to have a second sub that also goes down to 20 hertz to balance it out.
And he isn't entirely consistent on that through all the various presentations over the years. Because I am familiar with Dr. Geddes because he was the guy who originally suggested it was the 3 subwoofer system, but he suggested having 2 subwoofers basically across the room from one another, and then a third subwoofer up high. to try and take care of the vertical modes, the
Standing
floor to
ones,
ceiling
yeah.
modes.
Yeah, yeah.
He kind of pulled back from that stance, and then
Because that's insane, but yes.
and then started saying we'll still just use 3 subwoofers. And then he was saying, okay, just have one that goes all the way down to 20 hertz, because once you get a room where like all of the dimensions of the room are smaller, and in fact you're getting down to 1/4 of the wavelength of a bass note, so that starts to get like, or 4 times the size of the bass note, so it starts to get pretty darn large, right? So like the 55 foot long sound wave produced by a 20 hertz signal, divide that by 4, all right? Once all of the dimensions of your room are smaller than that, then you don't actually get any benefit from like multiple subs, because the sound waves are bouncing around so much in a room that small at 20 hertz that it kind of doesn't matter. It's just like everything's just piling up on top of each other. So he was like, okay, if you have a really small room, then you don't really need all the subs to play that low, because there's a point at which the room is so small that everything's just piling up anyway. But then he kind of backed away from that. So but it's still going down to this use 3 subwoofer system, and then individually EQ, set their volume, perhaps adjust the fully variable phase one at a time until you get the most uniform response that you can, and then apply a global EQ to that to get linear response. So I first want to focus on all the things that he says that are exactly the same advice that we've been saying, which is he makes it very clear going from 1 subwoofer to 2 subwoofers is a huge difference.
Right.
He recommends that those 2 subwoofers be placed across the room from each other, not both on the same side of the room, or, you know, stacking on top of each other, of course, doesn't do anything as far as creating better uniformity, but to get them across the room from each other. And then going to more than 2 subwoofers is more and more diminishing returns, the more subwoofers that you add, and that there's really no reason to ever go beyond 4. And that if you do go to 4, just put them in the 4 corners of your room and you're basically done. But he's saying you don't necessarily have to get 4 subwoofers if you do the painstaking process, or let him do it for you using his software, which he will not give to you. Then you can basically just go through the process of one at a time, adjusting all the parameters. So individual EQ, individual level, individual phase adjustment for each of those 3 subwoofers to get you the most uniform response that you can get. Now, Gene over at Audioholics basically did this in his room. That's exactly what he did, because Gene doesn't have a rectangular room. He has an L-shaped room. Gene ended up with 2 completely full-range speakers, because there's those crazy status acoustic speakers, 2 completely full-range speakers, and then 3 other subwoofers spread out around his room. And he did basically what Dr. Geddes describes, which is you start with your main speakers, you see what they produce as far as their bass goes, you add 1 subwoofer to them, and you adjust all the things that you can in that subwoofer by trial and error if you don't have his software. And he describes it himself. He's like, this could be a multi-day process just to get the first subwoofer down, because it is just trial and error of all the parameters to try and get the most uniform, again, uniform, not necessarily linear, the most uniform response across all your seating positions. Then introduce the second sub and do it again. You don't touch the first one, but you just do it again with the second one, then introduce the third sub and do it again. So this could be like a weeks-long process if you do it trial and error, or you can pay him $400. He'll use his software that he has to do it for you. This isn't a crazy out there one. It's just a very time-intensive one. And
or you can just buy 2 subs, put them across the room from each other, and run all this.
Yeah.
Boom.
Yeah. Because
I'm
even
done
he
in like
agrees,
5 minutes.
even he agrees that's the biggest improvement you're going to get is the 2 subs. Then you can refine it even more with a third and a fourth, which I agree. You can, absolutely. We've talked about that. Or if you can't put the 2 subwoofers across the room from each other, then you kind of have to resort to this, even with just 2 subs. You have to go back to the trial and error to try and get the most uniform you can. Once you have uniform, then do a global EQ to try and get linear. So he's not in disagreement. We're not in disagreement. We're just saying the easier step, because I don't think most people are going to take 2 weeks to do this. Or if you buy all the measurement equipment and pay him the $400, and his subs are passive subs, so you'd have to add amplifiers to them if you bought his subs. Once you total all that up, and you were going to have 3 subs anyway, you can probably afford to just buy the 4th one. And once you buy the fourth one, you don't need to do all this. So that's kind of where we fall on this thing. But he's not wrong. He's not wrong.
The guy's trying to make a buck. You know,
Well,
that's what it
sure.
comes down to it. And then
And the thing was,
there's nothing wrong with that.
he was on this multi-sub thing 30 years ago, which is way before most audiophile people. I mean, there's still all, like we just talked about, all the audiophile people who are like subwoofers are just bad, or if you have them, they have to be stereo, or
And it's
you know.
got, you know what? Honestly, for those types of people, anyways, if it's not complicated and weird, then they're not going to buy it. They're not going to trust Odyssey. They're not going to trust it. They're not going to trust
Yeah.
Wipeout. They're not going to trust MCACC or whatever the heck else is out there these days. Turn off. They're going to trust any of that stuff. They're only going to trust if they go through this process like this, and then it's going to be perfect. And then
But I
when,
mean,
when their
you know,
kids comes by and changes the knob, and it's like,
but I like that he was on this 30 years ago saying, look, bass, deep bass below 80 hertz, omnidirectional. You don't have to, there is no such thing as stereo bass. He's saying you send the same signal to all three of these subwoofers. You don't
Yeah.
have separate signals going to each of them. They can have separate settings on the three subs, but they're all getting the same original signal. Like, he was on this stuff before a lot of other people, and his method is absolutely genuine. It's just if you do it yourself, it's trial and error. It's probably going to take you a long, long time, or you pay him what amounts to enough to just buy yourself the fourth sub. So, yeah.
there you go. All right, we've got a question from Kevin that's like forever freaking long, so we're skipping it.
Really?
Kev-
I think
yes.
we can do it. Can we do
No,
it?
we're not doing it. It's only got 15 minutes. No, we can't.
Okay. Sorry. Sorry,
Kevin, we'll
Kevin.
get you next week.
You'll be first up next week, Kevin.
That's right. Will on Facebook.
Yes.
Could we recommend a particular in-wall and in-ceiling speaker model from Monoprice? They have carbon fiber and Kevlar models, and 5.25 and 6.5 and 8-inch models. Which ones particularly would we recommend most highly? First of all, let's just dispel this whole idea that there's a difference between carbon fiber and Kevlar.
It's just a material.
It is Kevlar. First of all, Kevlar people, the Kevlar people that made Kevlar, they do not want speaker manufacturers calling it Kevlar. They don't. They have. I've been told,
Aramid fiber is the generic name.
I have been told over and over again that from speaker manufacturers that they are not allowed to call it Kevlar anymore, so they'll call it something like carbon fiber. Because carbon fiber is something that is good enough for us to all understand, and it doesn't really matter. It looks about the same. It's just not yellow or whatever. You know, it doesn't really matter. So it's essentially, for all intents and purposes, the same thing. And I don't know which models he's particularly looking at here, but I tend to, depends on the size of the room, you know, and how much bass you're trying to get out of them. But I like 6.5s. I mean,
Yep.
I think 6.5.
They're a good compromise. Not only that, I will point you to the 6.5 inch, and I will say the one that they call Kevlar, simply because they offer a backer box for those
There you
ones,
go.
and they
See?
don't offer backer boxes for any of the other models.
Yeah.
So to me, that makes it real easy. Get the 6.5 inch Kevlar and get the backer boxes, and you're done.
So the deal with the 8-inch is you're going to get more bass out of it, but you're going to have a harder time crossing that over into a tweeter. You know, it's going to start breaking up a little bit. You know,
It's a bit bigger hole that you're
yeah.
putting in your ceiling or your wall.
Yeah. So, he says that if he's going to run Wipeout, where should he set the volume dials on his two subwoofers before he starts? His subs are diagonally opposite corners. His room is 11 by 26, and his Wipeout does not put a meter on the screen to help him adjust his subwoofer dials before it starts. Doesn't it tell you that it gives you an error if they're too loud or too soft? I know that.
Yeah, if they're way too loud or too soft, yeah.
So
but I mean, it has a
otherwise-
pretty large range that it'll adjust the trim up or down.
Otherwise, I would just run the whole thing, and then
Yeah.
if it tells
See
you
what it gives you.
see if it gives you like a negative 11, then turn it up some. Or turn it down some. If it gives you a plus 11, turn it down some. You know, it's just telling you that
Yeah.
it's having to or turn it up some.
I guess he doesn't want to run it multiple times, but
You know, by now you could have run it 100 times before.
the only other way would be to get yourself an SPL meter, go into the manual settings. I will say, since we're talking about the internal test tones and we don't know if they change with the master volume or not, they won't during Wipeout. I promise you the test tones won't change in volume during Wipeout, but when you're just going into the manual trim levels, they might. So turn your master volume all the way up to 0 dB. Set whatever the test tone signal thing is coming out of the subwoofer output, the manual one in the trim level, have that set at 0. Hold your SPL meter at your seat and adjust it until that test tone reads 75 dB. Adjust the volume dial on the back of the subwoofer itself, I'm talking about, until the SPL reader reads 75 dB. That would be the way to set it beforehand. You could do that for both individually and then run YPOW and it should be great. Or you can just run YPOW, see what it gives you, and adjust based on if it gave you a huge boost or a huge cut on either or both of the subs, adjust their volume dials accordingly. So that's kind of the easiest way.
Yeah, or you just run it. See what it gives you.
Yeah, no, I mean, and if it gives you like a +6 on one and a -6 on the other, that's fine.
I wouldn't touch that.
You're well within range. It's fine.
I would only worry if we get towards the end of the range.
Yeah, if once you're getting like +10, -10, then maybe consider changing the volume dial accordingly. Yeah.
All right, we're going to try to power through Sean's really
Okay.
quick. This is a long question too, but it's not as long as the other one. The other one looked like it had a lot of words. All right, Sean says things are going well with the build out on his theater room at the stage he has completed. I'm having to scroll here. All framing, soffit framing, low voltage wiring, which is 3-circuit lights, subs, chairs, and snack bar.
That's his high voltage wiring. That's his mains.
High voltage. I'm sorry.
Lights, subs, chairs, because he's going to have D-box chairs.
So, I was wondering what kind of chairs he had with electric chair. Yeah. Anyways, low voltage data run to the media cabinet. 4 runs shielded Cat 6 to the projector. 1 for a tablet. 1 for an IR repeater in the front of the room. 1 under the chairs for D-box or something similar. I don't know what that is.
He's got lots of Cat 6 going around, yeah.
Okay, is that still Cat 6? 7 speakers and 6 in ceiling. So 7.2.
2.6,
I guess.
He's pre-wiring, so makes sense.
2 coax, 1 front of the room and 1 in the rear. That would be for your subs.
Yep.
Smurf tube on all the speaker runs and data runs into a 3-inch PVC pipe. I don't know what a Smurf tube is.
I mean, it's basically just conduit, right? So he's got conduit going to all the stuff so that if he needs to swap out wires, he has the pipe there.
6 can lights and soffits, 4 vents in the soffit, filled all walls with Roxol safe and sound. So before he puts the drywall up, he has a few questions.
Yeah.
How should he wire the side surrounds extra pair, series or parallel?
Right, so he's thinking of having 2 speakers playing 1 side surround channel, which totally makes sense. He got 2 rows of seats. Do them in series. That's safest.
That's what I was going to... I'm thinking that I always have to think to myself, because series, they're in a line, and therefore the ohmage goes up.
They add together. You add together the whatever the...
I always have to think about it. It's something... I have to visualize the little picture in my head, and parallel is whatever. So series is safer?
Series is safest, yeah.
Can he mount a ceiling fan, which would be 12 inches tall, in front of the projector? There's not enough room for it behind.
Well, the projector... it's not quite 8 feet, as far as I know.
Yeah, 12 inch. You can get smaller fans than that, dude. Seriously, can, if you don't get the lighting kit on it, 12 inches is huge. You can get like 8-inch fans, and 7-inch fans without the lighting kit.
Yeah, because there's 2 ways to come at this, right? Like you would for sure have to have the top of the lens of the projector must be below the fan.
Yes.
That's fairly obvious, otherwise you're going to have a big shadow in front of that. And then if you do that, you're pretty much limited to having the top of the screen being even with the projector lens. You couldn't really have the top of the screen above that, because then again it would probably shoot the light into the blades of the fan.
Right.
So you just have to know, because he's going for a pretty darn big screen here. I think he was going for like a 150-inch screen.
Yeah, I remember that.
So the top of that screen would have to be at least 12 inches from the ceiling.
Dude, get a floor stand. Get a floor standing fan. Seriously, just do that. I know you want a ceiling fan, but honestly, this is...
To me, it seems like it could... Maybe it could barely squeak in, but you're going to want to be really careful.
Yeah. So that means that if your projection screen, if the top edge of your projection screen is anywhere higher than 12 inches from
the ceiling,
then it can't work. And you also have to lower your projector down so that it will be that high, which means it's going to be even lower than that. So it's going to be hanging down.
And it's going to be above his second row of seats, which are on a riser.
Somebody's bumping their head into that thing, is what I'm saying.
That's what I'm thinking. I'm starting to worry about it. I'm not super keen on this idea, Sean. I'm sorry. Aren't there...
Stand fans. Wall fans. Is there a wall fan? Ooh,
Yeah,
that'd be
or
kind of
like
cool.
two much smaller fans that actually go like side to side, leaving the middle clear or so. I don't know.
That still is not going to work that great because it depends on how close they
There
are to
must
the
be a
mic.
different way to move the air around than a ceiling fan that's 12 inches deep
Just put
or
like those
tall.
like a couple little stand fans, just like the little ones, just put them
Uh,
around your room. They're going to be loud and you're going to annoy you. And let me tell you something about my ceiling fans loud and it annoys me, like shaking back
man,
and forth and stuff like that. You don't want that. All this work you're doing, you don't want that
I
nonsense.
know.
Get rid of this.
Yeah.
So he's asked, should he do anything to the false wall besides stuffing it with insulation? I'd make sure it doesn't fall down. So frame it well. Other than that, I think you're all right. I can't really think about that. You got
Yeah, I
your
mean
wires, right? So
yeah, I
yeah.
mean the false wall really is just a frame to hold whatever you're putting on that false wall. So as long as you have the framing members where you want them to, because I assume he's going to have his speakers put in this false wall, then the false wall is holding the frame of the screen. So just make sure that all the framing members are where you need them to be. Other than that, it's just a frame holding up stuff. So
So the Golden Ear rep said that tower speakers would not work well inside the false wall. So which type would be best for left
yeah,
and
that's
right?
because the Golden Ears have their side firing passive radiators or even active subwoofer drivers side firing, so you wouldn't want to stuff insulation all
But don't
around
they
them.
have? Aren't they like the Def Techs where they have like bipole? They have stuff coming out the back sometimes
No,
and
they're
stuff like
not. They're
that.
not bipole, but they do have the side firing passive stuff on the
Okay. Yeah.
towers. So that would be the main reason. Because instead of being ported, they use like passive radiators, but you still can't block a passive radiator with a bunch of insulation. That's not going to help. So what you basically want is a sealed speaker. That's just a sealed speaker that doesn't have passive radiators or ports, unless it's front ported. Front ported could work.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a bit tough if he's going golden ear. Ugh. Because even their Aeon bookshelf speakers have passive radiators, so
Well, I
that
mean, you could
doesn't
theoretically just like pull a
work.
piece of plywood, like just right next to that, kind of angled out, so that it kind of angled the base back into the room. But it does. I don't really know that it's. I mean, how much bass are these things actually going to be putting out in this room?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
the other thing you could do is because they're going behind the false wall, rather than stuffing the false wall with insulation, just put some absorption on the physical front wall so
Yeah.
that what's behind the speakers will be insulated, but not what's to the side of the speakers, and then just leave the false wall open. Don't put any insulation in there. That would work. So
That's.
I'm
I mean, if you really want these speakers, that's basically. Then basically you have
yeah
an acoustic transparent everything up there,
yeah.
and
And you just have the physical front wall that's of course behind the front wall. You just have some insulation on that to catch that reflection that's hitting that front wall. That would work.
yeah. The rep also said that Sean would lose a lot of light using an acoustically transparent screen. Is this true? If so, what should he do? Uh, you,
15 years ago.
yeah, this is not as true as it was back in the day. The idea is
Yeah.
that acoustically transparent does let. I mean, if it lets air through, it will let light through.
There are holes in
There
the
that are
screen.
physically holds, but you are not losing. I mean, it tells you how much light you're going to get back at you by the rating on it. If it says
Yeah.
1.1, it's whether or not some of the light's getting through or not, you're still getting 1.1 back at you.
Yeah, no, if you're getting a woven screen, then this is largely mitigated. This advice from this rep was true when all we had were perforated screens, because those, if you walked up to them, you could see the holes. They were there,
Yeah.
plain as day. And guess what? Light went through those holes, never
Yeah.
to return if you had a black background behind it. But with the woven screens now, the holes in them are so small, and then the weave of the fabric that they're using can be like a coated weave, which is exactly what Seymour AV or Elite Screens or any of them are using to give them a 1.0 or a 1.1 gain. So yeah, it's a woven screen with a 1.0 or 1.1 gain. It's really not true anymore.
Yeah. So lastly, is he forgetting anything before he installs drywall for a good future-proof system?
This is the tough one, right? Because you don't want to close it all up only to realize there was something you wish you had done if you had all the walls
I didn't hear
still
any
open.
HDMI runs up to his projector. I'm
But
sure
he's got the
that's
tube. He's got the
the
tube.
tube, the conduit tube.
And he's planning, I think what he's planning to do is do one of the HDMI to Ethernet adapter thingies, so he doesn't have to worry about the length of the run.
Yeah.
Because that's why he ran 4 Ethernet cables up there, which is a good idea because for 4K that might become necessary.
Yeah.
So we gave him that advice and he listened.
I did see an HDMI to Cat 5
Yeah.
6E
Yeah.
thing, and the 1080p was I think it was 2 cables. So
Yeah, because the HD base T doesn't have to be. The HD base T can use 1, but there's a more generic solution, and it uses 2. So then if you're going to 4K, there's a chance you'll need 4. So I think he's prepared there. I mean, the main thing is that conduit. That's what most people don't do. Most people don't run conduit. If you do, you're in pretty darn good shape.
How do you feel about voice of God speakers? You want one of them? You got wire for that bad boy.
Jeez, I wouldn't.
I can't think of anything, honestly.
Gosh. I mean, I would hate this if we say seal it up and then there's something that we forgot.
It's theoretically possible.
Yeah, it sounds like you've done everything that we would do. I mean, the major things are once you're wired, if you have the conduit, he's gonna have insulation in there. He moved away from having it all be the rigid spray-in stuff. So
okay, that's good.
He moved to the Roxel Safe and Sound. That was our advice, so he did that. We just addressed the whole thing about the false wall, but that's a false wall where you're going to be putting the screen on it anyway, so you could probably adjust that afterwards. It's not going to be drywalled, being a false wall.
Usually false walls, you can get behind them, right? You got to be able to get behind them.
Yeah. I think you're in pretty good shape, Sean. I mean, he thinks so too. That's why he's just doing this one last pass over it. Golly.
I'm not seeing any holes here. All right.
Yeah, I think you're good, man.
All right. So
famous last words.
Are we going to talk about this Boston Dynamics thing? Is that with this thing at the end? I didn't even.
I just threw that in. It's a robot. It was interesting. If you've seen the whole Boston Dynamics things, the ones that look like kind of like a weird skeleton of a deer or a skeleton of a dog, you know.
Those Boston Dynamics guys are going to get us all freaking killed. Can I be honest with you about this? All they do is kick those robots over. That's what they do. Would they stop kicking the robots? Don't kick the robots.
It's to test their self-correction and balance.
I know what they're doing. I understand the concept. But why you gotta kick the robot? You're just asking for trouble.
But yeah, they introduced this Spot Mini. It's their smallest, quietest of these 4-legged robots they've done. It runs on batteries instead, because the old ones were like a diesel generator or something.
Yeah, they had those big cords.
Crazy loud. Yeah. But this one's batteries, runs for about 90 minutes, weighs 55 pounds. And they've got this like sort of giraffe neck attachment. So they have a video of it where
this video I have to look.
It's great. It comes in, it loads a dishwasher, and it throws away some trash, and then it brings a guy a beer, and then it pretends to be a dog where it doesn't hand him the beer, and it kind of like tugs on it the way a dog might if you were, trying to get a ball out of a dog's mouth or a chew toy or something like that.
You better give me that beer, robot. I will kick you myself.
And then it falls over and it slips on a banana peel and it uses its crazy giraffe neck to get itself back up. So it's all pretty freaky. It's all pretty freaky.
I think these guys are making money by YouTube hits alone. Like I think they are funding. They are funding their research by. And I think that's why they kick the robots. Like, we'll kick a couple of robots. We'll get a couple billion hits. People, the YouTube commenters come out and talk about how we're building Skynet, and little do they know, we are building Skynet. So, all right. Let's go back and thank. There's so much scrolling to get to the top of all these. Let's go ahead and thank Matt once again for talking us up to Dina over there at Ascend Acoustics.
Yes, thank you, Matt.
Verifying that they do, in fact, know that we exist. If you would like to get your question answered on this podcast, all you have to do is ask. You ask by emailing question@avrant.com. You can CC Rob at AV Rant or Tom at AV Rant. Go to the website, www.avrant.com. Leave us a comment there. You can also click on the Buy Us a Cup of Coffee link and support the podcast in that way. If you can think of another way, like Matt did, by talking this up to somebody or anything, let us know. We will be happy to mention you as one of our listeners of the week.
Yes.
Contact us on Facebook at facebook.com/AVRant podcast, Twitter at First Reflect for Rob, at AVRant_Tom for me, and for our producer, Austin, who is the reason I'm blurry today, is at Austin T and Pond for our producer. He has his own podcast. It's called We Watch Movies.
Mm-hmm.
It is a movie about. It is a podcast about. I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought there.
Watching movies?
No.
Oh, okay.
It would be ridiculous. No, it's about how to hijack Wi-Fi.
Okay.
Yeah, because I guess that the idea behind the podcast was that they wanted to watch movies, but they couldn't because they didn't have Wi-Fi and they have Netflix, and therefore they started talking about how to watch, and now that's all they talk about is Wi-Fi. hijacking.
Gotcha.
It's a terrible podcast. They're really bad people. They are bad people. I mean, why would you hijack other people's Wi-Fi? That's just rude.
Whole podcast about it though. We watch movies.
Too.
Yeah. So we'll mention Kevin. We will get to you first next week. We did get some questions that came in today. This is Tuesday, July the 5th that we're recording this. I know more questions already came in, so that's all coming up next week.
All right. For AV Rant, I'm Tom Antry.
And I'm Rob H. Now go out and listen to something.